You're the ones that need to know that he was able to do that. You have to tell the whole world that you saw the whole thing. You knew that the whole thing. And I have even more shame because I got the fucking text. And this last 4 messages from Kim to her boyfriend was, "I'm still alive, by the way, but going down now. I love you. I'm still alive, by the way, but going down now. I love you."
Hi, my name is Nicole. Currently in Manila Pacific, the Lady a Marshallese government supply ship on my way back from Anueta Castle, where I've been reporting on the nuclear waste site threatened by climate change. This is exactly the kind of stories I like to do, where I can combine on the ground, shoot letter reporting with the foreign policy lines, hopefully carve out a space for myself in the male-dominated world that is foreign policy. Thank you.
Nautilus. What is your position? Nautilus, XPE 3107. What is your position? All ships in the area of Copenhagen. We are looking for a private submarine Nautilus, black and 18 meters long. Ships with any information, call the rescue.
The latest news this morning. A search is underway in the sea around Copenhagen for a privately built submarine which went missing on Thursday night. On board was a journalist and the owner of the submarine, Danish inventor Peter Madsen, best known for his rocket building program, funded and manned by volunteers.
When you are asked in the courtroom, could you tell us what you were doing at a certain time on a certain position? The reason for that question is not being curious. It's about, if you answer that question and you were saying, yes, I was in the process of murdering my neighbor's wife or something, if you had to be honest. I mean, if you are under CAs, if you are, what do you call it, accused, you shouldn't say anything. Why would I want to be open to people who are interrogating me? Hell no.
Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark, known as Copenhagen to locals, sits beautifully on the coastal islands of Zealand and Amager. Generally, Denmark is known for its high-quality design and architecture, but specifically, Copenhagen is the center of attraction. The gloriously green city boasts a rich and varied cultural scene, as well as a dynamic culinary landscape. With a population of over 600,000 people, Copenhagen is ranked one of the happiest cities in the world for its relaxed pace of life and liberal social attitudes. But as happy as Denmark is, it recorded a total of 54 murders in 2017. And of these 54 murders, one was the murder of Kim Wall in August 2017. Kim Wall was born on March 23, 1987, in Trollberg, Sweden. She was born to Joachim and Ingrid Wall, who were journalists. She had just one sibling named Tom Wall. Kim grew up to be a very bright child, who always stayed dedicated to her goals. She studied international relations at the London School of Economics and excelled. But it didn't end there. Kim took her education a step further by attending Columbia University's School of Journalism, described as the Oxbridge of Journalism, for a master's degree. Within her peers, Kim was at the top of the class, and she received honors in her year. Kim was very interested in people and their stories, and this attribute reflected in the way she worked as a journalist. Kim would go to any length to tell people's stories and make their voices heard. Kim worked in Australia as a reporter for the Swedish Embassy, as a journalist at South China Morning Post in Hong Kong, and also worked for a European Union delegation in India. Her works were published in many international publications, including the BBC, The Guardian, and the New York Times. Although Kim shuffled between New York and Beijing, she spent most of her time in Copenhagen, where she lived with her boyfriend, Alissa Turney, a game and interaction designer. The two were deeply in love and had great plans together. One of the plans they had was to relocate to Beijing, China, but life had its own plans. On August 9, 2017, Kim was at her parents' house in Trelleborg, Sweden, spending time with her family, so they could take their yearly summer picture. Her family had taken a family portrait every summer since Kim was a year old, which means they had 29 pictures before August 9, 2017. Kim was also eager to see Ole, so she was in a hurry to leave for Copenhagen. Kim and Ole had plans to host their friends at their apartment the following day to say goodbye before they left for China on August 16, 2017. Kim's mother, Ingrid, knew Kim's presence was an opportunity to take the family picture, so she made sure they took the picture before she left, even though Kim's brother, Tom, was sleepy because he had worked a night shift the previous day. Unbeknownst to them, that would be the last picture they would all take together. On August 10, 2017, Ole and Kim readied their home for the house party. Soon friends gathered at their apartment, but before the merriment could begin, Kim got a call. The call was from Peter Madsen, a Danish inventor who built submarines. Peter and Kim had spoken on the phone briefly in the past about an interview. Kim wanted to interview Peter for a Wired magazine article she was writing. It was meant to be a very short interview to end her report, so she told Ole to let her be excused before the party started. Kim wanted to get the work done as soon as possible and get back to partying with her friends before it got too late. Kim apologized to her friends, who were already gathered for the party, and left for the interview. Peter Madsen was a well-known inventor who created 3 submarines. Not only that, but he had also built rocket ships and inspired a lot of people with his projects. Since the interview was about Peter's inventions, he invited Kim to ride with him on the UC-3 Nautilus, his submarine that was launched in 2008. Kim had a safe ride to the Copenhagen harbor, where Peter asked that they meet. By around 7 p.m., Kim was there. Peter was already waiting for her on the submarine, and Kim, who was initially scared to go on the submarine, found her courage and climbed gently onto it. By the time the gentle wind floated around her while standing by Peter on the tower of the submarine, she realized it wasn't a big deal. At 8 p.m., she texted Ole, "I'm still alive, BTW." She also texted Ole, "I love you, but I'm going down now." Not long after that text, Ole received another text from Kim that reads, "He bought cookies and coffee though." Although that was the last text from Kim, Ole didn't think there was a problem since he expected Kim to focus on her work. But soon, Ole started to get worried. Kim was supposed to be back early as promised, but it began to get later and later. When Ole could not reach Kim around 10 p.m., he started to panic. After calling everyone he could think of, he contacted the police at 1:43 a.m. and told them his girlfriend was missing. The Danish police began the search for Kim Wall, who was reported missing. They searched for the UC-3 Nautilus, the submarine that she boarded before she went missing, but Kim was not found. The members of the Danish Emergency Management Agency, DEMA, assisted the police in the search of the sea. All through the night they searched far and wide, looking for Kim. The divers covered a large dark part of the sea, going front, back, right, left, center, and deep into the sea, while also using cadaver dogs. Around 5:31 a.m. on August 11, 2017, Kim's mother Ingrid got a call from Ole, who told her that Kim was missing. Both Ingrid and Joaquin panicked and could only hope that Kim was alive somewhere. The rigorous search continued but the police would not find anything until around 10:30 p.m. At that time, a rescue helicopter found the sub in a bay southeast of Amager, near the Drogden Lighthouse, at a depth of 22 feet south of Copenhagen. The police also found Peter Madsen, but Kim was nowhere to be found. Peter told the reporters that were present at the search that the submarine sank due to a faulty ballast tank. He also said he saw a fisherman's boat nearby, and he swam to the boat to escape. Peter's story never mentioned Kim, so the police questioned him about Kim's whereabouts. He said he dropped Kim off at a nearby restaurant on the night of August 10, 2017, before the accident. The police lifted the submarine for inspection, and they discovered something suspicious. They discovered that the faulty ballast tank was tampered with on purpose. They also looked inside the submarine, and they found traces of Kim's blood and her personal belongings. They questioned Peter more, and he changed his story. He told the police that there was an accident when he lost his grip on a heavy hatch door that fell and hit Kim's head. Peter said there was so much blood where Kim landed and that she had no pulse when he checked. The police knew immediately that they had to suspect Peter, but on what grounds? There was nothing tangible to hold on to. They were not even sure what really happened to Kim, since her body had not been found. 11 days after Kim Wall went missing, on August 21, 2017, a cyclist while riding across a beach south of Copenhagen made a grisly discovery. It was a human torso washed up onto the shore.
New information about the mysterious disappearance of a Swedish journalist. Her name is Kim Wall, in what one major newspaper is calling the most spectacular murder case in Danish history.
The police department was called, and after examining the torso, they determined it belonged to Kim Wall, the Swedish journalist that had been missing for 11 days. The torso had been stabbed about 14 times in a horrific manner, and the rest of the body was not attached to it. Friends and family of Kim Wall then knew that their beloved is no more, but they still needed answers as to what happened to her on August 10, 2017. The police kept searching for answers, but found nothing until October 7, 2017, when divers found plastic bags in Koji Bay, less than a mile away from where Kim's torso was found. The plastic bags had metal scraps attached to them to prevent them from floating. And when the bags were opened, they contained Kim's head and legs. Peter was confronted again after these findings, and he changed his story again. This time he said Kim Wall died from toxic fumes while on his submarine. With Peter's conflicting stories, the police knew that he was hiding something. He also remained the only suspect in the case, as he was the last person that saw Kim alive, and he was also unable to provide clear details of what happened when they were together. Since Peter never confessed to Kim's murder, and there was no real evidence to hold anyone for it, no one was arrested. However, the police could not work based on their assumptions, so they proceeded with their investigation. The autopsy on Kim's body revealed that there was no blunt trauma to her head, which contradicted one of Peter's stories about a hatch hitting her head. The autopsy also revealed that Kim was bound and stabbed. It also showed that she had asphyxia, which means she was either strangulated or stabbed in her throat. With this evidence, the police had reasons to take Peter in for further questioning. During the investigation, his phone was searched, and the investigators found out that Peter watched a video on August 9, 2017, that detailed a young woman in pain as she was slowly beheaded with a small knife. His search history also showed that he searched for how to erase all photos on the iPhone. The investigators also found videos on Peter's computer showing women being murdered, and witnesses came in to testify that Peter was seen watching videos of decapitation and practicing asphyxiation. According to the investigation, no traces of Peter's DNA was found on Kim's body, but traces of bodily fluids were found in the underpants, which were secured from Peter Madsen after the arrest. Under questioning, Peter denied finding pleasure while he was with Kim. Peter was born on January 12, 1971, to Annie and Carl Madsen. He spent his early life in Sæby and Hong, Denmark. Annie was more than 30 years younger than Carl and had 3 other boys from 2 previous men. Allegedly, Carl abused his 3 stepsons, and Annie left the marriage when Peter was 6 years old, taking with her all of her children. Years later, Peter returned to live with his father, with whom he shared an interest in rockets. While in school, Peter took a great interest in rocket fuel. While studying physics and chemistry, he developed his first large rocket and launched it on March 3, 1986. He built it in his father's workshop and modeled it after the American ICBM MX Peacekeeper. The rocket did well, reaching a height of 100 meters before crashing. Fortunately, no one was hurt. In 1990, when Peter was 18 years old, he lost his father, but he never stopped experimenting and consulting engineers. He also joined the Dansk Amateur Rocket Club, DARK, rocket club in Copenhagen, but the other members gradually became disillusioned with him. DARK members claimed that saying his name would start the fire sprinkler system. He never finished any formal education, but took courses in welding and engineering to learn something about submarines. His enthusiasm yielded positive results, as people, enterprises, and organizations saw promise in him and funded his lifestyle and work. He built 3 submarines, UC-1 Freya, UC-2 Kraka, and UC-3 Nautilus. The Nautilus was a privately built midget submarine launched on the 3rd of May 2008 in Copenhagen, Denmark. Constructed over 3 years, it cost approximately $200,000 to build. On May 1, 2008, Peter co-founded Copenhagen Suborbitals with Danish architect Christian van Bengtsson. In June 2014, he left the project. Peter was responsible for the launch systems, launch pad, and booster rocket engines. Peter was already popular with his inventions, and a good number of people took interest to him. Unknown to them that Peter was a different person on the inside. His true self was only exposed via Kim Wall's murder. On January 26, 2018, 47-year-old Peter Madsen was charged with murder, indecent handling of a corpse due to the dismemberment, and assault due to the stabbing. The prosecution accused Peter of binding, hitting, cutting, and strangling Kim on his submarine on August 10, 2017. Peter did not admit that he had killed Kim throughout the investigation. On March 8, 2018, Peter's trial began, and he pleaded not guilty to the charges. The psychiatric evaluation showed that Peter was a narcissistic psychopath, but not delusional or psychotic. On April 25, 2018, Peter was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment. Peter was reported to have shown no remorse while in court. Instead, he occasionally stared at people in the courtroom to intimidate them. At one point, the Wall family was asked not to pass Peter in the courtroom because of the way he acted. While Peter admitted to dismembering Kim's body, he told the court, "I don't see how that mattered at the time, as she was dead." He maintained throughout the proceedings that her death was accidental. Even if Peter failed to confess, this sentencing brought closure to the family and friends of Kim, who never believed that she would be killed in a very close location to where she lived. They all knew Kim to be a brave journalist that was not afraid to go to dangerous places to get the information she needed for her work. If they ever worried about her, it would be because she traveled far and wide to work. Unbeknownst to them all, Kim would meet her untimely death in Copenhagen, the city where she lived. After Peter was sentenced to life imprisonment, he tried to appeal the sentence, but it wasn't granted. His wife, who he got married to in 2011, divorced him after he was arrested and asked that her identity be kept from the public. In August 2018, he was also attacked by an 18-year-old inmate, which had him hospitalized. With the fear of staying in jail all his life, he escaped on October 20th, 2020, by threatening prison staff with a fake gun and fake explosives he had made while inside prison. The police chased after him, and surrounded him in a nearby residential area, not far from her Sylvester prison. But the police could not move closer to him because the police thought he was armed with explosives. The bomb experts were summoned, and the police waited till they arrived. When the experts got there, they found out that it was all a decoy. Then the police arrested him and took him back to the prison. For that offense, he had to go to court again, and on February 9, 2021, a Copenhagen court sentenced him to an additional 21-month prison sentence for trying to escape. Although Peter was already serving life imprisonment, it looked like the extra sentence would not affect his jail term. The additional sentence, however, would play a role if a probation request were ever made. Peter maintained his innocence throughout the case, claiming the death was an accident. But in a documentary series, while Peter Madsen was secretly recorded, he reportedly confessed. According to the Danish newspaper Ekstra Bladet, the series was based on more than 20 hours of telephone interviews with Peter from prison, which were taped without his knowledge. In one recording, when asked if he murdered Kim, he responds, "Yes." He also said, "There is only one who is guilty, and that is me." 3 years after Kim had been murdered, her parents Joachim and Ingrid, who were also journalists, were determined to put out their daughter's story. They found writing Kim's story therapeutic and determined that the story would not reflect the moments of her death, but instead the person that Kim's family, friends, sources, and readers knew her to be. Ingrid says, "The book is our way of telling the world who Kim was, a daughter, a journalist, and a human being." The book is titled A Silenced Voice, which is a tapestry of past and present, at once a joyful chronicling of a life well lived and a family's reckoning with a life being extinguished. It follows Kim as she leaps from London to Cuba, New York to Haiti, and Beijing to Sri Lanka, collecting stories, bylines, and beloved friends as she goes. It also traces the hours, days, and weeks after Ingrid and Joachim woke up to the news that their daughter is missing and learn from the television that a stranger is being charged for the murder. Another thing that brought relief to the Wall family was the creation of the Kim Wall Memorial Fund, a grant created to support female journalists. Apart from the story written by Kim's parents, there were different TV presentations used to portray the life and death of Kim Wall. First is The Investigation, a Danish-language television dramatization created by Tobias Lindholm, which shows the criminal investigation of the case. It is a 6-part series that premiered on September 28, 2020, featuring different professional actors. The series was carefully scripted by engaging those involved in the investigation of the case. The investigation does not feature Peter or the crime itself, but focuses on the investigative work leading to his indictment and conviction. In September 2022, Netflix released a film titled Into the Deep, The Submarine Murder Case. Directed by Emma Sullivan, this film detailed the incident, as well as covered the life of Peter Madsen, using the documentary footage of Peter, his friends, and interns that was being filmed to document his quest to launch a rocket ship into space, using his submarine as a command center. Ole Stube, Kim's boyfriend, found it difficult to comment after the death of his beloved, but years after, he spoke about Kim and emphasized how much of a good human she was. The case of Kim's murder is a disturbing one that shows how much wickedness lies in the heart of humans. It also prompts us to think about how many women have been endangered while working in their various fields. What did you think about this case? Do you think Peter Madsen got what he deserved?
The man asking for the cigarette looks like he has just lost everything. However, the story is quite the contrary. This interview was a result of a call made to 911 on January 18, 2005.
Aurora 911.
Yes, hello. We need a police officer over here. We have 2 dead persons over at the other house.
2 dead persons?
Yes, they're in the bedroom already, laying there in a puddle of blood all over the place.
This call came from a man living in Aurora, Colorado. However, his name was kept confidential. When the police reached the location, they found 25-year-old Crystal Arguello and her 16-month-old son, Ravyen, stabbed and strangled to death in one of the home's bedrooms. What could have been the reason behind such a heinous act? Who was the killer? Located in the state of Colorado, USA, Aurora is a beautiful city that offers a diverse and dynamic lifestyle. Its thriving arts and cultural scene includes theaters, galleries, and music venues, providing a plethora of entertainment options for residents. One of the reasons Aurora gained national fame is its association with the renowned Buckley Air Force Base, contributing to the city's rich military history. However, like any urban area, Aurora faces challenges with its crime rate. This city is grappling with rising crime rates that continue to break its own records year after year. Regrettably, this particular case is also connected to the city of Aurora. Crystal Lynn Schartzer was born in 1980 to Doug and Mary Lynn Schartzer. While details about her childhood remain elusive, her life took a significant turn when she met Damian Michael Arguello, the love of her life, at the age of 16. It was in 1996 when they were introduced on a blind date arranged by mutual friends in the city of Fenton. During this period, Crystal was pursuing her education, attending college with aspirations of becoming a nurse. Meanwhile, Damian found intermittent work, helping his uncle install carpets. On the day they first met, Crystal and Damian experienced an undeniable connection, leading them to tie the knot in 1999. Shortly after their wedding, they welcomed 2 children, Damian Jr. and Celeste. And soon, their family was complete when the third baby boy, Ravyen, came into their lives. However, the happiness in their lives began to slowly dissipate. While their family appeared to be functioning well on the surface, there were underlying issues that deeply troubled Crystal's family. Following a decline in the relationship, Crystal decided to live with her children at her parents' home in the city of Holly, Colorado. From June 2003, communication between Crystal and Damian dwindled, and their once strong bond began to crumble. The situation eventually escalated to the brink of divorce, and by mid-2004, the divorce proceedings were nearing completion. However, on August 3, 2004, an unexpected turn occurred when Damian visited Crystal's home late in the night and assisted her in packing for a move back to Aurora, Colorado. The next morning, when Crystal's parents woke up, they discovered that Crystal and the children had disappeared. A week later, Crystal reached out to her father, informing him that she was in Aurora and intended to live with Damian. However, her parents were deeply unhappy about this decision. The couple, along with their children, began their fresh start in Colorado, and for weeks life seemed normal. However, after 5 months, on January 18, 2005, the house that once held hope became a living hell for the mother of 3. In the early hours of January 18th, Crystal and Damian's first 2 children, Damian Jr. and Celeste, were around 7 and 6 years old at the time, sought refuge in their neighbor's home. The neighbor, whose name remained undisclosed, was taken aback by the children's evident fear and unease. They confided in him that Crystal and Damian were involved in a heated argument. Concerned, he promptly went to Damian's home to investigate the situation. On his way, the neighbor noticed Damian driving away in Crystal's car. He entered the house hoping to find Crystal and her 16-month-old baby, Ravyen, but the scene that greeted him was beyond his worst nightmares. Both mother and child were lying lifeless in a pool of blood, having been stabbed and strangled to death in one of the home's bedrooms. Horrified at what he had seen, he called 911.
Aurora 911.
Yes, hello. We need a police officer over here. We have 2 dead persons over at the other house.
2 dead persons?
Yes, they're in the bedroom already, laying there in a puddle of blood all over the place.
Upon arrival, the police swiftly began investigating the crime scene. Realizing that Damian had fled, they promptly initiated a search to trace Damian's whereabouts. Thankfully, after just a few hours, they managed to apprehend 27-year-old Damian Michael Arguello, who was found in Crystal's car only a few miles away from the scene of the crime. After his arrest, Damian was taken into custody, and the interrogation commenced. However, what surprised the interrogators the most was Damian's complete lack of remorse. Even though he initially seemed like he was regretting it, it didn't take much time for his emotions to completely change. He answered their questions as if the heinous act was inconsequential, showing no emotions or remorse. All he seemed to want was a cigarette, seemingly indifferent to the gravity of the crime he had committed. Damian's confession to the crime He began cooperating with the investigators regarding the case. However, it appeared that Crystal had bravely attempted to protect her baby during the horrifying ordeal. The murder, which involved both strangling and stabbing, took a gruesome 10 to 20 minutes. It was later clarified that Damien first attempted to strangle Crystal. As Crystal lay on the floor, she valiantly shielded her baby with her body, but tragically they both succumbed to the fatal stabbings. During an April 2005 preliminary hearing, a detective revealed a disturbing motive behind the horrific crime. Damien was allegedly upset, as he suspected that he might not be the father of the baby. Moreover, he admitted to smoking crack cocaine before the tragic incident, which played a role in his erratic and violent behavior. On July 15, 2005, in Adams County Court, Damien entered a guilty plea to 2 counts of first-degree murder. By pleading guilty, he avoided a trial and also the possibility of facing the death penalty. However, Damien will spend the rest of his life at the Colorado State Penitentiary, with no possibility of parole. Damien's sentencing took place on September 16, 2005. Damien Michael Arguello, 27, received 2 life sentences for murdering his wife and their 16-month-old son. He will spend the remainder of his life at the Colorado State Penitentiary with no chance of parole. Crystal's parents, Doug and Mary Lynn Schartzer, were present to confront the man who had taken their daughter and grandson from them. Doug Schartzer expressed his anguish, stating that Damien showed no genuine remorse for his actions. While Damien appeared to cry, it seemed more like he was feeling sorry for himself rather than truly remorseful for the horrific deeds he had committed. Since their daughter's tragic death, the Schartzers took on the responsibility of raising Crystal's children, Damien Jr. and Celeste. Despite the children's memories of that fateful night, the Schartzers handled the matter delicately and refrained from pushing them to talk about it. They ensured that the children received ongoing counseling to help them cope with the trauma they had experienced. Schartzer vividly remembered the conversation he had with his daughter and grandson on January 18, 2005, the day of the murder. Everything seemed normal during their talk, and little did he know it would be their last. In that poignant telephone conversation, Schartzer's heart was warmed as he heard his 16-month-old grandson, Ravyen, call him Papa for the first time, cherishing a precious memory of their bond that would forever remain etched in his heart. Adams County District Attorney Don Quick, having served as a prosecutor for 18 years, expressed that this was the most horrific crime he had ever encountered. Some of the evidence was withheld until the conclusion of the case, but he now wants the Schartzers to find solace in knowing that their daughter's final moments were spent heroically trying to protect her baby. Quick was shocked to discover that the baby had been intentionally stabbed, rather than accidentally. Finding comfort in the closure of the legal proceedings, Crystal's parents felt a slight sense of justice, knowing that Damien will forever be behind bars. So do you think the Schartzer family got the justice they sought? Or do you think Damien should have been sentenced to death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you.
911, what's your emergency?
He's trying to lock. I'm sorry, he's trying the door. Dad. No, don't answer the dad.
Get off my porch.
Dad, no! Oh my God, can you please hurry?
Okay. Hello? Ma'am?
It was July 31, 2022, when he came to visit Allison at her home in Sydney, Ohio. With a strong resolve to meet his ex-girlfriend, he began pushing the door, only to encounter his tragic fate. He was shot 3 times, instantly ending his life. What might have motivated someone to go to such great extents to shoot him on the spot? Why did they shoot James in broad daylight? Sydney, Ohio, nestled in the heart of Shelby County, offers a unique blend of small-town charm and modern lifestyle. This picturesque community, with a population of 20,421, is renowned for its tranquil ambiance, making it an ideal place for families and individuals seeking a peaceful environment. However, like any other place, Sydney is not immune to the shadows that crime can cast. Although its crime rate is comparatively moderate when compared to larger urban areas, Sydney still encounters its fair share of difficulties. And this unfortunate case of James Rayl also unfolded in Sydney.
Born on February 25, 2000, to Scott Rayl Jr. and Chelsea Rayl in Louisville, Kentucky, James Rayl's early years were spent in Taylorsville, Kentucky, alongside his siblings, Jessica Colber, Jordan Rayl, and Jaden Canaster, until he turned 8. He then continued his academics in Fairlawn, Ohio. After graduating from Fairlawn High School in Fairlawn, Ohio, and Upper Valley Career Center in Piqua, Ohio in 2018, James showcased a remarkable array of interests and passions. Whether it was his passion for basketball or his unwavering commitment to bodybuilding, he pursued his endeavors with dedication. Alongside these pursuits, he assumed the role of mentor, inspiring and guiding others in their journeys towards health and fitness. In addition to his diverse activities, he worked as a steelworker, a profession that complemented his hands-on approach to life. Moreover, his fascination with cars was evident in his ownership of 3 vehicles. James also found delight in playing video games. Apart from his hobbies, James also had a high school romance. He met Allison Duckrow in high school, and they quickly went from friends to being in a relationship. The first year seemed great, but eventually the relationship turned toxic. Allison grew tired of James's hurtful words and the way he treated her with disrespect. James, on the other hand, always seemed to focus on Allison's flaws and made her feel worthless. The situation got worse, leading Allison to break up with him and decide to move on by the beginning of 2021. But James wasn't ready to let go. Despite continuing to mistreat her with his words, he couldn't seem to forget Allison and started trying to reach out to her bit by bit. Allison, however, was determined to keep him out of her life for good. Around 18 months after their breakup, on July 30, 2022, James sent her a voice note asking how she was doing. Little did she know, this voice message would be the last thing he ever said to her.
Anytime we interview anybody, we just kind of go over your Miranda rights. It doesn't mean that we think you're in trouble. It's just so that you know that you have rights and what they are.
Stacy Duckrow and her daughter Allison had just gone shopping and returned to their home at 2907 North Cuthar Road in Sydney. Approaching their porch, they observed an unfamiliar car entering their property and parking behind their own vehicle. Despite not recognizing the driver at the moment, they proceeded to open the door to their house and went inside. Moments after they entered, they heard the doorbell ring. James was standing on their porch, waiting for them to open the door. However, Allison's family was resolute in not letting him in under any circumstances. The family finally felt a moment of relief when James left the porch. However, their peace was short-lived as he returned after only a few minutes, this time determined not to leave until he saw Allison. As soon as James tried to push the door, Allison, who was hiding inside the house, dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency?
There's some guy on my front porch. He won't leave.
Do you know who it is?
Yes. Yeah, he is an ex-boyfriend of mine. Oh my God.
At this point, Allison and her family were frightened. To stop James, Allison's father, Mitchell Duckrow, shouted at him repeatedly, asking him to leave their house. However, James remained resolute, persistently attempting to force the door open.
The door started popping open. Something was trying to hold the door closed. I wouldn't come in. Dad's holding the door. Mom's freaking out. Starts overpowering my dad. I was so scared. Ellie was terrified. We both screamed.
Although the police had been notified, it was taking them some time to arrive at the scene. Unfortunately, the door was not going to hold up until their arrival, as James was fully determined to break it down and confront his ex-girlfriend.
But he hit it again. I saw Mitch fly back because he hit the door so hard.
Just as the door was on the verge of giving way, it happened. 3 gunshots rang out from the firearm that Allison's father, Mitchell, was clutching. James was pushed back by the force of the bullets, and he ultimately fell in the walkway in the front of the garage. As he lay in the walkway, neighbors attempted to assess the situation, though none ventured far enough to confirm his condition. Amidst this, the officers from the Shelby County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene. Inside the Duckrow house, the family remained unsettled by the unfolding events. Upon entering, the police discovered 3 spent shells scattered on the floor. Allison, who had been terrified, finally found some relief and embraced her father, believing that he had rescued her from danger.
Thank you for saving me. You're the best dad ever. You just saved my life.
However, the outcome was different for 22-year-old James Rayl. In his pursuit of meeting with his ex-girlfriend, James lost his life. While Allison and the Duckrow family could now finally breathe a sigh of relief, with their nightmare finally ending, a stark contrast was evident. James lay lifeless, his family still unaware of the tragic news that would soon engulf them. Following James' death, the Duckrow family was brought in for interrogation.
And after each one, I'll ask you if you understand it. I don't think you're stupid. I do that with everybody, okay?
Okay.
All right, first one is you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand that one?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything you say can be used against you in the court of law. Do you understand that one?
After the rights were read and Allison's introduction was made, the interrogators started asking questions about James and their relationship.
So you broke up in 2019. Did you remain friends after that?
Not that last time, no. I said I didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore after that.
But are you Facebook acquaintances or anything like that where you could have kept an eye on what you were doing? Okay.
I had blocked them on everything that I could have.
Okay. And then the voicemail or the call last night, when's the last time you had talked to him?
It was either the beginning of last year or the end of the year before, because my cousin had been living with us for a little bit.
Okay.
And him and my cousin were friends, so he came to pick him up. And I told Clay, my cousin, I was like, hey, could you tell him that I'm not comfortable with him being over and everything? He was like, yeah, that's fine. And then that was it. But I never, personally said anything to him.
Right. What's Clay's last name?
Rayl also.
Okay.
Next on the list of questions was whether James had any involvement with drugs.
If he was on any drugs, or has he ever done any drugs that you know of?
He has done drugs.
Okay. Do you know what his drug of choice is?
He liked to do acid a lot.
Okay.
Back then. I don't know about recent, because he moved out to California not too long ago and then came back, so I don't know if he started something while he was out there.
Gotcha. When did he come back? How long has he been back in town, do you know?
I want to say maybe a year.
Okay.
It's not too long, but not recent either, but
How long was he living out there?
maybe about a year also.
Okay. So back then when you were dating him and kind of friends with him, acid was his...
Acid and weed, and I don't know what else he did other than that.
Was he ever on meth or heroin or anything that you know of? Okay.
I don't think he would have told me because he knew I didn't like it.
Right.
Now it was time to determine whether James was a person who used to make threats, or if he had any history of violence.
Well, I'm really sorry that this happened to you today. This is not how anyone wants their days to go, for sure. Is there anything about him that you think we should know, about his personality? Has he ever threatened anybody before? Was he like a fighter?
I thought he was always very nice. I mean, he worked out all the time. I don't know if he did any boxing or anything. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, he was okay in high school, but then after he came back from California, he just was different. Like his close friends or whatever, he just started treating like crap, and nobody wanted to deal with it.
Do you know if he had a current girlfriend?
Not sure.
During another interrogation, Allison's father was asked if he had any knowledge of the messages that James had sent to Allison.
Again, I was called in from home about this, okay? I can't imagine what you're going through right now, you and your family, okay? Our main purpose today for this interview, okay, the reason why we separate you is just to kind of cover our bases and to just kind of get a line of events of what occurred, okay?
I understand.
So if you would, I understand, were you aware of the text messages that James had sent your daughter last night?
Was not.
Okay, so your daughter did not share those with you?
No.
Okay, all right.
Although Allison received the voicemail in which James clearly expressed a desire to talk to her, she was scared. Surprisingly, she never informed her parents about it. The reason behind her reluctance to do so, despite her fear, remains unclear. While there might have been potential for a deeper mystery in the case, it was kept straightforward. James was the culprit, and Allison was the victim. However, according to James's sister, Jessica, things were entirely different.
There wasn't a full investigation done. They were only on the scene for 2 hours and then rushed it to the grand jury. My brother had no history of anger or violence. He was very kind and compassionate.
Jessica believed that no one would ever discover the true reason why her brother went to meet Allison that day. While there might be suspicions that James intended to harm Allison, it would ultimately remain an assumption. His side of the story was never heard, as he was killed without being given an opportunity to speak. The actions taken by the Duckgrove family were indeed swift and decisive, seemingly without attempting to understand the true purpose behind James's visit. Furthermore, James was unarmed, and the entirety of the voicemail suggested that he had no intention of violence, but rather was expressing his longing for Allison. Here is the complete voicemail that he had sent to Allison the day before his death.
Hi, Ellie. It's James. I just wanted to reach out to you because I just wanted to see how you're doing and maybe hear from you if that would be all right, I guess. It's been a while since I've talked to you, and I don't know. I feel like it. I don't know what I feel. I do know that I do want to talk to you, though. I do. It'd be nice. It'd be sweet. It's probably late right now, but if you want tomorrow, you could probably give me a call. And yeah, it's about it. Please give me a call back. Thank you.
Even though the motive behind James's action remained unclear, the decision was final. Shelby County Prosecutor Tim Sell announced that the jury would not be pursuing charges against Mitchell Duckgrove for the shooting of James Rayl on July 31, 2022. In September 2022, a Shelby County grand jury voted 8-1 not to indict Mitchell Duckgrove on charges related to James's death. The decision was based on Ohio's Stand Your Ground legislation, which stipulates that homeowners are not legally obligated to retreat before using a firearm. Following the news that Mitchell would not be charged with the killing of James, the family of the latter launched a Facebook page to demand justice for the deceased young man. Amidst the global criticism and accusations against James, with some even suggesting he deserved his fate, the Rayl family remains resolute in their unwavering pursuit of justice. People's beliefs might differ, and so might their actions. So what is your opinion on this case? Were the actions of the Duckgrove family justified, or was James an unintended victim? His simple desire for conversation leading to a tragic outcome? Feel free to share your opinions. We would like to hear from you. In the early hours of November 15, 2004, at Broccoli Drive in Bethlehem, New York, 52-year-old Peter Porco and his 54-year-old wife, Joan Porco, were sound asleep in their bedroom, completely unaware of impending tragedy. When morning came, Peter was found lifeless at the bottom of the staircase by his co-worker, Michael Hart, while Joan was in critical condition in their bedroom upstairs. Both had been attacked multiple times with an axe. The investigation into the attack took many unexpected turns, involving multiple suspects and even raising suspicion who was responsible for the violent attack on Peter and Joan Porco. What were the motives behind the crime? And what evidence led the police to the eventual suspect? Bethlehem is a town located in a beautiful region of the United States. It is known for its vibrant community and rich history. With its picturesque landscapes, rolling hills, and tranquil atmosphere, Bethlehem is a haven for outdoor enthusiasts. Its close proximity to major cities like Albany adds to its appeal, making it a desirable place to live and visit. But this beautiful town was witness to a violent crime on November 14, 2004. Peter Porco was born on August 22, 1952, in Norwalk, Connecticut. He grew up with his parents, Ralph and Jane Porco, In the 70s, during his time at the University of Albany studying law, Peter crossed paths with Joan Balzano, who was studying speech therapy and also worked in a local school. They fell in love and soon decided to tie the knot. They settled in Bethlehem, New York on Broccoli Drive. The pair had been married for 30 years by the early 2000s. In 2004, Peter, at 52 years old, worked as an appellate division court clerk, while Joan was a dedicated children's speech pathologist. Both were active in their church, but Joan's devotion to her family was unmatched. Together they had raised two sons, Jonathan, 23 years old, and Christopher, 21 years old. They also had a dog, a golden retriever, who was also a member of the family. Jonathan was serving time in the U.S. Navy, stationed on a powerful nuclear submarine. Meanwhile, Christopher was pursuing his studies in biomedical engineering and economics at the University of Rochester, not too far from their family home. The Porco family appeared to be living a happy and successful life in their charming old house. However, one fateful November morning, everything changed. Little did anyone know, there was a mysterious secret lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed. It was still dark in the early morning of Monday, November 15, 2004, when the alarm clock beside Peter Porco's bed began to ring. Peter woke up and reached over to turn off the alarm, so as not to disturb his sleeping wife, Joan, who was beside him. As he got out of bed, Peter felt a chill in the air, so he quickly put on a sweater before making his way down the hallway to the main bathroom. Peter stood at the vanity mirror, where he looked at his reflection. He was all covered in blood. His face appeared different. Strangely, he didn't seem to be concerned or disturbed by it, as if he was not fully aware of his surroundings. Despite this, Peter continued with his usual morning routine. He picked up his toothbrush and began brushing his teeth, just as he did every day. Even as he continued, the presence of blood remained noticeable. After finishing, he left the brush in the sink and proceeded downstairs to the kitchen to start preparing for work. Along the way, he left traces of blood wherever he walked. Despite this strange occurrence, Peter went about his task, sorting through the mail, unloading the dishwasher, and getting food from the refrigerator, making his breakfast. While Peter continued his morning routine, he saw the presence of blood droplets that seemed to appear everywhere he went, but he wasn't bothered at all. He stepped outside to retrieve the daily newspaper from the front porch. Unfortunately, as he reached for it, the front door unexpectedly closed and locked behind him, leaving Peter locked out of his own home. Thankfully, he knew there was a spare key hidden under a flower pot nearby. As he retrieved the key and used it to re-enter the house, he saw larger droplets of blood on the porch steps. After leaving the key in the lock and allowing the door to close slightly, Peter took a few steps back towards the kitchen. However, his condition suddenly deteriorated, causing him to lose consciousness and collapse at the bottom of the staircase. Peter, known as a gentle-natured man, was a reliable worker at the courthouse and never missed a shift without notifying his colleagues. Therefore, when he didn't show up for work on November 15, 2004, without any explanation, his colleagues grew worried.
It started off as any other day until Peter Porco didn't show up for work, and people began to get worried because that wasn't like him.
They tried calling the Porco family home, but no one answered. Concerned, Peter's co-worker, Michael Hart, decided to visit Peter's house to check on him. Michael drove to the quiet and peaceful Broccoli Drive and parked in front of the two-story Porco residence. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Michael attempted to call Porco's home number twice but received no response. He then contacted his boss, who suggested that he go up and knock on the front door. As Michael approached the house and knocked, he quickly realized that something was not right. As Michael stood outside the house, he could hear the Porco's golden retriever barking from inside the house. Curiosity got the better of him, and he cautiously looked inside. What he saw left him stunned, as if he had seen something incredibly frightening. In a panicked voice, Michael told his boss that it was a crime scene and urged him to call an ambulance. Without wasting a moment, he dialed 911 to report what he had discovered. When the police arrived at the scene, they encountered a horrifying sight that no one could have imagined.
He looks down and he sees on the cement steps some drops of blood.
Peter Porco's lifeless body lay at the bottom of the stairs, motionless on the tiled floor. He had suffered a devastating blow to his head, resulting in severe trauma. Shockingly, half his skull was missing, exposing his brain. His jaws had been removed, and his eyes were open and lifeless. Blood from the severe head injury had soaked his clothes and was splattered across the walls and some interior doors. When he received a distressing call about an unfolding situation on Broccoli Drive, he immediately rushed to the Porco's house and was directed to the first floor by Detective Chris Bowdish, who had arrived a few minutes earlier. Carefully maneuvering around Peter's lifeless body, Kevin and Detective Bowdish made their way upstairs to the main bedroom. Inside, they encountered a horrifying scene. Joan Porco was found lying flat on the bed that was covered in blood. The walls and bedside tables were also stained with blood splatter. Joan had cuts and wounds on her upper arms and hands, which suggested that she had tried to defend herself during the attack. However, her head had suffered the most severe injuries. One of her eyes was split in half, and the side of her jaw was hanging loose from her face. The sight was deeply disturbing.
Investigators could see her brain while they were trying to save her life. She was also hit with the axe along her arms.
An axe covered in blood was found at the foot of the bed, and the police believed it to be the murder weapon. Peter had been attacked with the same axe, sustaining 16 blows to his head, which was 13 more than his wife. This suggested that Peter was the intended target. Shockingly, Joan Porco, despite her injuries, was still alive and conscious. Even though she couldn't speak, she found a way to communicate with Detective Bowdish through nods and hand gestures.
I said to her, "Can you hear me?" And she shook her head visibly up and down in the yes notion that she could.
The officer asked her if she knew who attacked her.
Sensing that Joan's condition might worsen and she could pass away any time, Bowdish began questioning Joan to gather crucial information. In order to determine if the perpetrator was a family member or someone else, Bowdish asked if a family member was responsible for the attack, and Joan nodded in agreement. Having already spoken to Michael, Peter's co-worker, Bowdish knew that Porco's had 2 sons. When he specifically mentioned Jonathan, Joan indicated that he was not involved. However, Bowdish then asked about her younger son, Christopher Porco.
I asked her, "Did Christopher do this to you?"
Amongst all the confusion, a question that puzzled everyone was how Peter was able to continue with his morning routine after sustaining 16 axe hits. The answer to this question came with the results of Peter's autopsy. The autopsy reports showed that Peter's brain had suffered extensive damage in the attack. The upper part of his brain, called the neurocortex, responsible for higher functions like thinking, language, and reasoning, was severely affected. However, the lower part of his brain, known as the paleocortex, which controls primal instincts and habitual behaviors, remained intact. This explains how Peter was able to get up and perform his morning routines, even though he was gravely injured and almost half dead. His basic instincts and ingrained habits allowed him to carry out familiar tasks without conscious thought. The news of Peter and Joan Porco's murder quickly spread, capturing the attention of many. A reporter from the Times-Union contacted Christopher, who was in Rochester, New York at the time, and informed him about the attack on his parents. He asked the reporter for more information, but she couldn't provide any details and promised to call him back. Christopher anxiously awaited for the phone to ring in his dorm room, but it remained silent. Finally, he gathered himself and decided to reach out to the local police near his parents' home to find out what had truly happened.
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by the Times-Union saying that my parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information for me.
Hey, Chris, whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, you're in Rochester?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a phone number there, Chris?
Yeah, I sure do. 585-274.
Okay, are you in a dorm there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have a dorm name or?
It's called Monroe.
Okay. Is there a room number there? Okay. And you're hearing from the Times-Union?
Yeah, they called me and said my parents were found, I guess, I don't know. They didn't say how or anything.
Okay. I'm going to try and find you somebody you can talk to. I'm not quite sure who's in the office, but let me try and find you somebody who may have some more information for you.
Thank you
If you'll
very
just
much.
hang on the line for me, okay?
Thank you.
Chris?
Yes.
Okay, one of my detectives is out on the road right now, Detective Rudolph. We're
Okay.
going to have him call you back momentarily, okay?
Thank you very much.
Let me just confirm your phone number, 585-274.
Yes. Yes. That's correct.
Okay, you'll be expecting a call from Detective Rudolph. He's going to give you a call right back, okay?
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
After some time, Detective Rudolph called Christopher back and delivered the heartbreaking news that his father had been killed and his mother was in the hospital. Christopher was already preparing to come back to see his parents when he received the call. However, due to some reception issues, the call got disconnected, and Detective Rudolph asked Christopher to come to the police station to continue the conversation.
Hi, I'm calling back, Detective, I don't remember his name. I was on the phone with him a minute ago. He told me to call you back.
Okay, your name?
Chris Porco.
Hold on one second.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's better. I don't have the static anymore. Okay, so now who's bringing you down?
My Uncle John is my mother's brother.
What's his last name?
Balzano. B-A-L-Z-A-N-O.
Okay. Is it just the two of you that are going to be coming down?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. Now, as far as, when was the last time you said you came down and saw your parents?
About 3 weeks ago. It was on the weekend. I can give you a date. I have to figure it out. I'm not really sure.
Okay, but about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Okay, and the email, what's going on with your email? You said you emailed him today, but you didn't get a response?
Well, yeah, I emailed him this afternoon. My dad at work.
Okay.
About college loan stuff.
About what?
College loan stuff.
About college loans?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me just, so you will be here probably, you're going to go right to Albany Med?
I don't know. I don't even know where my mom is, but.
Yeah, she is at Albany Med.
Okay. Do you know her condition?
No, because I haven't talked to her. Let me give you my pager number.
Okay.
Because when you get there, I'll come and see if there's anything I can do for you.
Okay.
422?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you're going to have a cell phone, right? Or your uncle's cell phone?
Yeah.
All right, let me give you my cell phone also, just in case.
Okay.
Oh, it is 788?
Mm-hmm. 788.
Right.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Christopher asked about his mother's condition, but there was absolutely no concern in his voice. Normally, a child would panic upon hearing something like this, but Christopher didn't seem concerned. His Uncle John Balzano picked him up from campus and drove him to Bethlehem, which was a nearly 4-hour journey. Paramedics tried their best to save Joan Porco, but they struggled to place an oxygen mask over her face due to her injuries. When Christopher arrived at the hospital, Joan was undergoing surgery. He was greeted with hugs from friends and relatives who had gathered in the waiting room. Shockingly, a family friend informed Christopher that he was a suspect in the attack. Christopher couldn't believe that anyone would think he could harm his own parents. He was then approached by Detective Bowdish, who wanted to talk to him, and he agreed to go to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, Christopher remained polite and cooperative. He told the police that he had been periodically visiting his parents, but hadn't stayed with them for 3 weeks. He strongly denied any involvement in the attack and provided an alibi for the night of the incident.
Your mother's communicating. She's saying you were there at the house. I don't know why she would say that. She knows what happened. I hope she does. I was not there.
Christopher explained that he went out to dinner with a friend in Rochester at 9:30 p.m. and returned to his on-campus dormitory afterward. He spent the evening exchanging online messages with his girlfriend, Sarah Fisher, and watching a movie in the dormitory common room until he fell asleep on the sofa. Christopher willingly allowed the police to take his fingerprints and blood for testing. He even lifted his shirt to let them check for any superficial injuries that might indicate his involvement in the attack. He provided his clothing for analysis, and his yellow Jeep was also examined, but investigators found no evidence linking him to the crime. Also, no traces of blood or fingerprints belonging to anyone other than Peter and Joan were found at the crime scene. Strangely, the murder weapon, the axe, did not have any fingerprints on it. investigators could not find any evidence that connected Christopher to the attack. After being questioned for 6 hours, Christopher was allowed to leave the police station as there was no solid evidence against him. He went back to the hospital to see his mother, Joan, who had undergone a 12-hour surgery and was in a medically induced coma. Miraculously, 3 weeks later, Joan woke up from the coma.
Everybody was very surprised. It was a miracle. She obviously had a strong will to live, and the doctors just did an amazing job.
Joan had suffered severe injuries in the attack, including the loss of her left eye, a portion of her skull being removed, and permanent scarring on her face. Her voice was also affected, and she could only speak in a quiet whisper. Against all odds, Joan miraculously managed to survive, despite the severity of her injuries. However, a significant issue arose as Joan had no memory of the night of the attack. She could recall her activities leading up to that day, such as working in the yard and going to church, but had no recollection of the night of November 15, 2004. It seemed as though fate was protecting the identity of the attacker. Most importantly, Joan couldn't remember identifying Christopher as her attacker and denied ever doing so. In her heart, she believed Christopher to be innocent. Once Joan unequivocally stated that Christopher had no involvement in the attack, the police were compelled to stop looking at him as a suspect. With Joan's denial and support for her son's innocence, the investigators had no choice but to eliminate Christopher as a suspect in Peter and Joan's murder.
I am absolutely positive that my son was in no way involved in this heinous crime. I implore the district attorney's office to leave my son alone and to search for Peter's real killer.
This led police to redirect their attention towards other evidence and potential suspects in their quest to solve the case. The police discovered that Peter Porco had received a serious threat from a man named Patrick DeLucia, who had lost custody of his children before the New York State Supreme Court, where Peter had worked. Peter took the threat seriously and decided to protect himself by keeping a handgun next to his bed. However, as time passed without any further incidents, Peter felt less concerned and eventually stored the gun away in a closet, thinking that the threat had passed.
The man told him he was...
The police strongly believed that Patrick, who had threatened Peter, was waiting for the perfect moment to carry out his revenge. On the night of November 15, 2004, they suspected that he attacked Peter and Joan to fulfill his vendetta. Without wasting any time, the police located and extensively questioned Patrick about his whereabouts during the attack. However, Patrick had a solid alibi that proved he was not involved. With no other evidence or reasons to connect him to the crime, the police ruled him out as a suspect. It was at this point that they received information about an anonymous letter which could provide new leads in the investigation. An envelope containing a white powder was delivered to the headquarters of the Times-Union newspaper in Albany, a city north of Delmar. When a staff member opened it, a white powder spilled out from one of the corners. The staff quickly contacted the police about the suspicious package. Inside the envelope was a letter from someone confessing the murder of Peter Porco.
Peter Porco was not even a challenge. Once I got inside, I repeatedly hit him in the head and neck with a small axe I brought with me. I ignored all his pleading screams. Also, I beat Joan Porco, but unfortunately, she survived. If you ever want to find me, you might want to stop going after easy suspects. Show me some respect I deserve. Catch me if you can.
The letter was a significant lead in the investigation, but the police had doubts about its authenticity. They questioned why a killer would willingly come forward and advised the police not to focus on easy suspects. It seemed as though someone wanted to divert the attention of the investigation towards serial killers, potentially hiding their own involvement. The police had to carefully consider the motives and credibility of the letter while continuing their search for the truth. The police couldn't find out where the letter came from, even after conducting tests. They found that the white powder was harmless and couldn't uncover any fingerprints or clues that could lead them to the person behind it. A police lieutenant, when asked about the letter, shared that he didn't consider it a breakthrough in the case, but rather viewed it as another intriguing path they were exploring. However, the lieutenant did not disclose that the police had already concluded that the letter was a hoax. They focused their attention on solid suspects, who may have had a motive to kill Peter. During the investigation, it was discovered that Peter had an unexpected connections to the criminal underworld, as his uncle Frank Porco was a known mobster in New York. 30 years before the attack on Peter and Joan, Peter's uncle Frank had attended their wedding wearing expensive jewelry and carrying a gun. There were rumors that Frank had betrayed his fellow mobsters, and Peter knew about this and was about to take action against him. This led some to speculate that Peter and Joan could have been targeted as revenge. This theory gained traction because the attacker had used an axe, and Frank was known as Frankie the Fireman because he had killed 2 people with an axe in the past.
It was what they call a signature killing, you know, that the mob would do. And it was a fireman's act because it was retaliation for Frankie the Fireman.
However, further investigation revealed that the axe used was not a fireman's axe, but a regular one from Peter's garage, which they had purchased from a local hardware store.
He was in prison because he wasn't a snitch. You know, he had been made offers to cooperate with the authorities to avoid prison, and he didn't, so he ended up in prison.
Additionally, Frankie was already in prison for being a loan shark. There were also rumors that Frankie might cooperate with authorities and provide information in exchange for a reduced sentence. However, a background check on Frankie debunked this theory. Throughout the investigation, it was confirmed that Frankie was in federal prison during the attack on Peter. This meant that he couldn't have been the one responsible for the crime. With all the suspects eliminated, the police found themselves back at the beginning of their search. They were frustrated because they didn't have any strong evidence or leads that could point them towards the real killer. It was a challenging situation for the investigators as they had to regroup and find a new direction. The police started to wonder if they had overlooked any important details in the case. A nagging feeling crept into their minds. Were they missing something right in front of them? Could there be a vital clue hidden in the past of the Porco family? Determined to uncover any overlooked details, they decided to thoroughly investigate the history of the Porco family. They wanted to learn everything about their past, hoping to uncover any information that could provide valuable clues and help solve the mystery of the crime. They discovered that 2 years prior, in 2002, Peter had reported a burglary. It appeared that someone had broken into their house by breaking the window in the garage and stealing Peter's laptops. During their examination of the house on November 15, 2004, they found a window in the garage that was slightly open and had a cut screen. However, when they tried to open it further, they couldn't because Peter had installed bolts in the window frame to secure it. The window was only open about 4 inches, making it impossible for anyone to enter through it. This meant if the attacker had entered the house, it must have been through the front door. Surprisingly, the police discovered that it was Christopher who had stolen the laptops back in 2002. On November 28, 2002, while Christopher was at home for the Thanksgiving holiday, someone broke into the Porco home and stole 2 of Peter's laptops. Then on July 21, 2003, another time when Christopher was staying at home, another burglary occurred. Joan's laptop and other electronics were stolen. This raised suspicions and led the police to develop a theory linking Christopher to the burglaries. The police discovered that Christopher had an eBay account. They found evidence that all the stolen items had been sold using that account. To confirm their suspicions, they traveled to San Diego and recovered Joan's stolen laptop from the person who had purchased it. They believed that there was more to the story than what initially appeared, and they wanted to reveal the complete truth behind the attack on Peter and Joan. The police learned that Christopher had been facing some academic challenges. While his parents had high hopes for his success at the University of Rochester, Christopher seemed more focused on having fun rather than studying. Christopher's poor grades led to his expulsion from the university and suspension after the fall of 2003. His parents tried to encourage him to follow in his brother Jonathan's footsteps and join the Reserve Officers Training Corps program, which would provide a scholarship for his Navy service. However, the situation was odd because typically students receive warnings and offers of assistance before they are ultimately suspended for poor performance. It is common for universities to provide students with second chances to improve their grades and academic standing. Christopher relied on the hope of second chances he decided to give it another shot by enrolling at Hudson Valley Community College in the spring of 2004, believing that success there would pave the way for his return to the University of Rochester. Unfortunately, history repeated itself, and Christopher failed once again. During his visit to England as a part of his parents' study abroad program, he received an email from his mother, Joan, expressing her disappointment and scolding him for failing his classes at Hudson Valley Community College. "You just left and I can't believe my eyes. I look at your interim grade report. You know what they say, 3 strikes and you're out. Explain yourself." However, Christopher chose not to respond to the email, leaving his parents furious and deeply concerned about his well-being. While he enjoyed his time in England, he eventually settled down to write a response to his father, Peter. In his message, Christopher confidently blamed the college registrar for their incompetence and for messing things up. He admitted to making a mistake and receiving a low grade of C on a test, but he assured his father that he shouldn't worry because he would take care of everything once he got home. However, Christopher's actions contradicted his words when he returned from England, as he decided to lie to his parents once again. Christopher told his parents that he had successfully been readmitted to the University of Rochester. He lied, saying that the university had made a mistake by wrongly grading one of his finals, which had significantly impacted his overall grade. Fortunately, the error was discovered, and the university was in the process of rectifying the situation. As a result, Christopher would be able to return to his studies, and the university would cover the cost of his tuition for the semester to compensate for the troubles they had caused him. Peter and Joan were relieved after listening to this, and they believed that Christopher would be able to continue his studies at the University of Rochester as they had hoped. They prepared and sent him back to the university, expecting him to complete his semester there. However, the truth was quite different from what they believed. In reality, the university had never requested Christopher to return, nor did they offer to cover his tuition. So how did he manage to get back in? Christopher took matters into his own hands by forging transcripts from the community college. He created fake records that made it appear as though he had successfully completed several semesters with excellent grades, thus making him eligible to return to the University of Rochester. Unaware of the deception, the university accepted these fraudulent transcripts and allowed Christopher back into their institution. However, Christopher faced a challenging situation. When it came to paying for his tuition, he couldn't approach his parents for money because he had already misled them by claiming that the university would cover his expenses. One might think he would take the responsible route and work hard at a part-time job, saving up enough money to pay for his tuition himself. But Christopher had other plans. He chose the path of deception once again. He approached his parents and asked them for their financial information and a co-signature to secure a loan of $2,000. Christopher took the financial information and co-signed loan documents to Citibank, but instead of borrowing just $2,000, he deceived his parents by forging Peter's signature and obtaining a loan of $31,000. With this money, he paid for his tuition as planned. However, Christopher's deceptive actions didn't end there. Shortly after, he once again forged his father's signature to finance the purchase of a flashy, bright yellow Jeep Wrangler, allowing him to indulge in the luxurious lifestyle he had always desired. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for Christopher, until Citibank contacted Peter to discuss repayment of the loans, alerting him to the fraudulent transactions. The call came as a shock to Peter, as he discovered the significant amount of money that had been taken out in his name, including the $16,000 loan Christopher supposedly co-signed for the Jeep Wrangler. He thought that Christopher wanted a $2,000 loan, as he had said, but all this additional information made him furious. Filled with anger and frustration, Peter repeatedly tried to reach out to Christopher. Unable to contain his anger any longer, Peter decided to write an email to Christopher, delivering a strong warning and even threatening legal action, which left Christopher with a final chance to face the consequences of his actions. "I want you to know that if you abuse my credit again, I will be forced to file forgery affidavits in order to disclaim liability, and that applies to the Citibank college loan. If you attempt to reactivate it or use my credit to obtain any other loans,
I have to take legal actions against you." Christopher chose not to respond to the email, and he stopped contacting his parents, adding to their growing concern and worry. They became increasingly troubled about his well-being. Just 7 days before the devastating attack on Peter and Joan, Joan reached out to Christopher in an email, expressing her genuine concern for his mental state. She lovingly urged him to contact them, emphasizing their unconditional love and their desire for his success and happiness in life. However, it was tragically ironic that Christopher returned home only after his father's death and the horrifying incident that unfolded. Peter and Joan Porco had life insurance policies worth a staggering $1 million, and after their death, all the money of the policy would directly go to their sons. However, what raised suspicions further was Christopher's recent visit to a financial counselor just a month before the attack in October 2004. This raised many crucial questions. Where was Christopher expecting such a massive amount of money to come from? Could it be related to the insurance policies? Did money serve as a motive for Christopher to harm his own father? With these questions lingering, the police made their way to the University of Rochester, hoping to find the answers they were seeking. The police determined to find out where Christopher was on the night of the crime. They decided to question the students in his dorm, Monroe, to gather information. Surprisingly, every single one of them, including his fraternity brothers, stated that Christopher was not with them that night. They shared that they had a movie night in the lounge where almost everybody in the building gathered to watch the film, Shrek 2, until the early hours of the morning, around 3:30 a.m. It was a fun and memorable night for everyone except for Christopher, who was noticeably absent. The students even tried to call him, but he was nowhere to be found in his room or the entire dormitory. An unexpected turn in the investigation occurred when Christopher's friend, Jason, stepped forward with crucial information. He revealed that Christopher had told him he needed to meet his sick aunt, which is why he couldn't join the movie night. Christopher also mentioned parking his muddy Jeep behind the dorm. This revelation raised a pressing question. Who was this aunt that Christopher claimed to meet? Curiously, Christopher didn't have any aunts living near his dorm or in Bethlehem. It became evident that Christopher's alibi of sleeping on the couch the entire night was a complete lie. He was intentionally trying to mislead the police and divert their investigation. The burning question remained: where did Christopher actually go on that fateful night? The police reviewed surveillance footage from the campus. To their surprise, 4 cameras captured a yellow Jeep Wrangler leaving the campus at 10:30 p.m. on the night of November 14, 2004, the exact time Christopher claimed to be asleep on the couch. The Jeep returned the following morning around 8:30 a.m., just hours after the attack on November 15, 2004. This raised pressing questions about where Christopher had been for such an extended period and where he had gone. The police decided to pursue their leads and headed to the toll booths between Albany and Rochester. If Christopher had passed through these toll booths, it would strongly fateful had already been deactivated around 2:14 a.m. The time of deactivation was stored in a box in the basement, a detail that Christopher likely wasn't aware of. After deactivating the alarm, he proceeded to the garage where he obtained an axe, the murder weapon. With a horrifying act, he launched a violent attack on Peter, striking him 16 times with the axe. The disturbing sound of the attack awakened Joan, who was startled and horrified as she witnessed Christopher's horrifying attack on her husband. Despite Joan's attempt to save herself, Christopher was determined to leave no evidence or witness behind. He viciously attacked Joan 3 times with the axe, targeting her head, believing that she would eventually succumb to her injuries by morning, and cracked the garage window to create the illusion that someone had broken into the house through the window, making it appear like a burglary gone wrong. However, Christopher was unaware that Peter had already secured the windows with bolts, making it impossible for anyone to enter. After meticulously cleaning himself and removing all traces of blood and fingerprints from the house, Christopher severed the phone line at 4:54 a.m., ensuring there would be no means of communication. In this way, he sought to eliminate any possible witnesses or evidence that could link him to the crime. With his plan carefully executed, Christopher swiftly departed from the Porco's house, and at 5:12 a.m., he re-entered the New York State Thruway, heading back towards Rochester. As the morning progressed at around 8:30 a.m., the cameras on the roof of a medical center that while the video confirmed his departure from campus, it did not reveal where he actually went. McDermott pointed out the crucial testimony of Marshall Goki, who saw Christopher's Jeep in the Porco's driveway at 4 a.m. McDermott firmly believed that it was indeed Christopher's vehicle. This indicated that Christopher was present at the Porco home during the time of the attack. When considering the combined evidence of Marshall Goki's testimony, the surveillance videos, the toll taker's records, and the knowledge required to deactivate the alarm using master codes, McDermott concluded that Marshall Goki's account perfectly aligned with the rest of the evidence, strengthening the case against Christopher. Finally, Joan Porco, the key witness, also revealed that she had no memory of the events from that night and did not recall nodding to indicate her son as the attacker. In a surprising move, Joan publicly declared her son's innocence, challenging the prosecution's entire case against him. In the trial, Jonathan Porco was also present, and he expressed his anger towards Christopher for taking away his father's life. The police claim that Joan identified her son as the killer by nodding. However, the defense team argues that the prosecution's case was weak because there was no forensic evidence connecting Chris to the crime. According to the defense, there was no bloody footprints or fingerprints that tied Chris to the scene, and no forensic evidence was found in his Jeep. According to Terry Kinlan, the defense attorney, the surveillance video was not a concern. He explained that Christopher parked his Jeep off campus and then wandered around until later in the morning around 3:30 a.m., when he returned to the dorm lounge and fell asleep. Kinlan stated that he knew why the alarm at the Porco's house was deactivated using the master code. He claimed that Peter Porco had a habit of disabling the alarm to let the dog go out and sometimes even forgot to reactivate it. During this time, he stayed with Elaine Lafort, a veterinarian whom Christopher had worked with for a long time. Elaine considered Christopher like a son to her. 19 months after the savage attack that tragically took Peter's life and forever changed Joan's existence, on June 27, 2006, the trial commenced. It was heartbreaking to see that Joan entered the courtroom alongside the man accused of committing this violent crime, her own son, Christopher. The courtroom became a battleground as the prosecution and defense engaged in a 7-week-long struggle, presenting the bloody details of this circumstantial case. Over 80 witnesses testified, shedding light on the events surrounding the tragic incident. Paramedics Kevin Robert and Dennis Wood stated that they observed Joan Porco nodding when they asked her if Christopher was the one who attacked her. However, Joan's neurologist, Dr. Mary Dumbavi, informed the jurors that it was unlikely for Joan to fully comprehend the questions due to her severe injuries. The prosecution challenged Christopher's alibi by summoning 9 of his frat brothers as witnesses. Rossi, one of the investigators, testified that they brought in everyone who was present in the lounge that night, and all of them confirmed that Porco was not there. To determine if Christopher drove to Porco's home, the jurors heard testimonies from the 2 toll collectors, who recalled seeing a yellow Jeep similar to Christopher's on the night of the murder. Additionally, neighbor Marshall Goki shared his account of spotting Christopher's Jeep on the morning of the attack. On the other hand, a forensic pathologist reminded the jury that there was no trace of blood from the crime scene found on Christopher. However, the prosecutors provided explanations for this. They believed that Christopher probably did not get much blood on him during the crime. They also noted that Christopher had enough time inside the house to change his clothes. Moreover, they pointed out that Christopher worked in a veterinary hospital and has been trained to avoid contamination. Defense attorney Shanks strongly disagreed with the prosecution's claims. He argued that it went against common sense. If someone repeatedly strikes another person with an axe for 15 to 20 times, it was expected that blood would be present on the attacker. Shanks asserted that the lack of blood on Christopher was evidence that he did not commit the crime. When asked about his thoughts on trial, Christopher expressed optimism about the progress and the outcome regarding his guilt or innocence. Even though he decided not to testify, he wanted to convey a message to the jury. He urged them not to rush to conclusions and to carefully consider all the evidence.
Christopher believed that when they examined the entire picture, they would see that things didn't make sense, and his innocence would become apparent. After a lengthy 7-week trial, both the prosecution and the defense anticipated a prolonged deliberation by the jury. However, to their surprise, the jury reached a unanimous verdict in less than 6 hours on August 10, 2006, ruling a minimum of 50 years in prison. Christopher would be eligible for parole in 2052. When the verdict was announced, Christopher remained emotionless. When asked about it, he explained that he was advised by his attorney not to show much emotion, regardless of the outcome. Joan unfortunately arrived too late to hear the verdict regarding her son's fate. When Christopher and his attorney sat down, his first request to the attorney was for her to inform his mother about the verdict. Christopher was visibly upset. However, by the time they returned to the hotel, someone had already informed his mother. The attorney met with Joan, who was overwhelmed with devastation upon hearing the news. According to the prosecutor David Rossi, Christopher believed he was cleverer than everyone else when he committed the crime. However, he was mistaken in thinking it was a flawless plan. The guilty verdict, although adding more sorrow to Joan Porco's life, ensured that justice was served. After 16 long years, an interview was finally arranged with Christopher Porco to discuss the case and verdict. It was a challenging process to gain access to the prison and conduct the interview, but finally in early 2023, the opportunity arose. The interviewer had 2 hours to ask Christopher Porco various questions, but the most pressing one was the first. Did he commit the heinous crime he was just convicted of? During the interview, Christopher Porco shared his experience of the past 16 years.
I'll ask you the obvious question again, Chris. Did you do this crime?
I didn't. I had nothing to do with this. I've said that from day one, and it's the truth.
Reflecting on his life behind bars and offering his thoughts on the case that had consumed his existence.
Weeks go by very quickly, and so it's easy for years to kind of go by too. You know, when you think about what's happened in the past 16 years outside of here, George Bush was president when I got here, so.
Right.
Christopher's smile vanished as he discussed the trial, revealing his perspective on the moment he pleaded guilty. Christopher's new attorney, Danielle Muscatello from Barkett Epstein in New York City, was seeking the attention of another judge.
People of the state of New York against Christopher Porco, count 1, murder in the second degree. What's your verdict? Guilty.
I think we were overconfident, I would say, going in, and felt like there just wasn't enough evidence and can kind of rely on that. Having said that, a criminal trial is as much about narrative as it is about evidence, and you got to hand it to the prosecution in my case. They told a wonderful story. I don't blame the police for initially suspecting me. I don't blame them for prosecuting me, even though they knew there were real problems with the case.
She planned to file a 440 motion, a legal argument requesting the criminal court to reconsider the verdict from years ago and re-examine the Christopher Porco case thoroughly.
In order for Christopher to have done this, which we of course adamantly maintain that he did not, he would have had to completed these heinous acts in a very, very narrow time span. And what his attorneys failed to do is they failed to break that down. And when you break it down piece by piece, it doesn't fit. And it doesn't fit because it didn't happen.
One thing that was evident from talking to Christopher Porco in prison was that his mother remained his staunchest supporter. The final question posed to Christopher was whether, in the event of a new trial and the prosecution's desire to avoid further proceedings, he would be willing to plead guilty to the attack in exchange for being released with credit for time served.
Somebody, either in the DA's office or high up in the Bethlehem Police Department, realized that they didn't have a warrant for information that they believed was going to be critical.
Porco's lawyers will have to wait for several months to find out if their legal strategy was successful. In the meantime, Porco is currently serving his 17th year of a 50-year-to-life sentence.
It sounds like your mom is still very much in your corner. And
very much. She's the toughest person you'll ever meet. We speak every day. She has borne the brunt of this without a doubt. So we've gotten through this together, really. We're the support system for each other. but she's endured much more than I ever will.
Despite years behind bars, Christopher's guilt or innocence continues to be a subject of debate. What are your thoughts on this case? Was it Christopher who attacked Peter and Joan Porco, or someone else? We'd love to hear from you. On Friday, August 3rd, 2007, a 52-year-old nurse named Mindy Sloss was at her home in Anchorage, Alaska, preparing to visit a few patients in the city of Fairbanks in a couple of days. Those trips to Fairbanks were a regular thing for Mindy. She would often visit there for a couple of days and then return home. But this time, mysteriously, she had disappeared without a trace. Mindy never showed up for work in Fairbanks. As the authorities worked hand in hand with one of Mindy's friends, they uncovered a trail of murders, some of which even dated back to the mid-90s. Where could Mindy, an ordinary nurse in her 50s, have vanished? Did she fall prey to a monster, or was there more to the story? Our case today takes us to Anchorage, a humble city in the state of Alaska in the USA. Known for its cultural sites, traditional crafts, and stage dances, Anchorage attracts many adventurers. This vibrant city also has many positives, such as its stunning scenery, no sales tax, and a friendly community. However, the city also has its downsides. Anchorage has consistently been in the top 10 most dangerous cities in the U.S. Being Alaska's largest city, criminals enjoy the advantage of traveling through the area virtually undetected. The violent crime rate in Anchorage is more than double the national average of the USA. And back in 2007, a selfless nurse's life was tragically snatched away from her in this very place. Mindy was born on July 16, 1955, in Brooklyn, Kings, New York, to the couple Walter and May Sloss. She grew up in Syracuse, New York with her brother, William Sloss. When Mindy was in her early 20s, she left home and settled in Seattle, where she met a man named Robert Conway, or simply Bob Conway. Mindy and Robert got along well and soon fell in love with each other. By 1980, the soulmates moved to Alaska. For a very long time, Mindy had wanted to pursue a career in nursing. She knew it was not going to be an easy job, but she was dedicated to devoting long hours to achieve something that really mattered to her. Mindy earned a bachelor's degree in nursing from the University of Alaska, Anchorage. She worked tirelessly to advance her knowledge and skills to improve her ability to serve her patients by earning a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins, an adult nurse practitioner degree from the University of Portland, and a psychiatric nurse practitioner degree from the University of New York, Stony Brook. Even though Mindy was doing well in her career, she had to go through many hardships. Her mother's passing in 1999, followed by her father's in 2001, took a huge toll on her. Thankfully, Robert was there to get her through this tragic time. In the years that followed, as she recovered, Mindy developed a passion for baking. Each year, she would eagerly wait for her favorite time of year, which was the berry picking season.
Mindy had a Jones.
Mindy greatly enjoyed traveling, whether it was to some exotic destination with Robert or wherever her work took her. She went happily. She served the public in various nursing positions in both rural and urban Alaska. And on top of that, she helped a wide variety of public health programs with her excellence in the nursing field, which was reflected in Mindy's exceptional professionalism and work ethic. During the latter period of her career, Mindy devoted her practice to helping take care of psychiatric patients. She was responsible and dedicated, always willing to give more than 100%. Her passion for life shone through every day, as she encouraged all the people to live their lives to their fullest potential. During all of Mindy's ups and downs, Robert was always by her side, planning his next holiday destination with Mindy to make sure she took breaks from her busy life. Just like any other day on Friday, August 3, 2007, Mindy arrived at her home on Cuddy-Sark Street in Anchorage, Alaska, after a busy day at work. She was supposed to leave for Fairbanks to tend to some patients there in a few days and was preparing for that. But on Sunday, August 5, 2007, she missed her flight out of Anchorage and all of her appointments in Fairbanks. Jerry Yett, one of Mindy's closest friends, tried to contact Mindy to figure out where she had been, but she never answered any of her calls.
Saturday when I called her, there was no answer. And then on Sunday, her cell phone was full, not taking messages, and that was not like Mindy.
Bob, Mindy's boyfriend, also tried contacting Mindy and reached out for help to Jerry after failing multiple times.
I knew there was something really wrong. I didn't know which way to turn. I didn't know what to think. You don't know where to begin. You don't know where to look.
On August 7, 2007, one day after Mindy had failed to show up for work, Jerry called the Anchorage Police Department and officially reported her friend missing.
I was on my way home one night and the sergeant of our unit called and said that we had a suspicious missing person and asked if I could come back in and work on the case.
Jerry and Mindy had been friends for 18 years. They first became acquainted while working together as nurses, and gradually they became best friends. In this busy field of work, they were each other's biggest supporters. They loved to spend time together and frequently went on small trips. They took care of each other, and Jerry would even look after Mindy's cat, Willie, when she had to go away. But everything changed in that 1 week of August 2007. On Tuesday, August 7, 2007, Detective Pam Perino arrived with her team at Mindy's house to conduct an investigation.
She was a very responsible, reliable person that took commitment very seriously and had never been out of contact for this long.
She met with Jerry, who claimed that earlier, when she arrived at Mindy's house to check on her, she found the house to be in complete disarray.
Jerry yet, Mindy's really good friend, showed up, and we talked inside the house for a while, and she told me the things that seemed out of place to her.
Although there weren't any signs of a burglary or a break-in, there were some details that Jerry found odd. It definitely was not in a state that Mindy would have left it, even if she was in a rush to leave for work.
I made her a special custom-made apron, and it was all of her favorite colors, and it had moons and stars, and I had given her that for her birthday. And the apron was wadded up in the garbage. And I said, Mindy didn't put that there.
In addition to that, there was an empty bottle of wine, and knowing how restless Mindy's sleep was, the bed seemed to be too perfectly made. Taking a look around the house, detectives found that Mindy's car was gone too. Jerry told the detectives about Mindy's flight to Fairbanks, but pointed out that Mindy didn't like driving to the airport since it was so close to her place, and also she always thought that the parking there was expensive. The sudden disappearance wasn't making any sense to Jerry, but looking at the circumstances, she couldn't help but fear the worst.
Maybe she'd gone out Sunday berry picking or doing something, and something physically had happened.
As Jerry grew more and more worried, the detectives decided to take a look around Mindy's neighborhood and ask people if they had seen anything, even minutely suspicious.
Every single house they didn't have a good accounting for who actually lived there and who didn't.
After an initial round of questioning a few of Mindy's neighbors, the detectives were able to gather some information. Mindy was last seen at her home at about 7 p.m. on Friday, August 3, 2007. They also learned that Mindy had frequent arguments with her next-door neighbors, who were known for being overly chaotic and rowdy. From the very beginning, detectives suspected foul play and thought that Mindy's long-term boyfriend, Bob Conway, might have something to do with her disappearance. However, after multiple rounds of interrogating Bob,
I wasn't really happy they were looking at me, but I knew they were pursuing every angle, so I guess in a way you're thankful a little bit for that, but
he was soon dismissed as a suspect when he was able to provide a solid alibi, confirming that he hadn't seen Mindy that weekend. A few days later, after Bob was left off the hook, the detectives noticed some activity in Mindy's bank account.
You just kind of can look at someone's bank information and figure out if things are normal in their life at that point, or if things are unusual and something's wrong.
Authorities discovered that two $500 cash withdrawals had been made at two different ATMs from Mindy's account.
They said that it was unusual for her to withdraw cash, and the cash withdrawals were in the early morning hours. And it was a white male, and he had a bandana pulled up just under his eyes, and he had a hat on, a baseball cap on. It looked like he was trying to disguise who he was.
As the detectives examined the CCTV footage,
everything that he could to get that ATM card back, because he knew there was $20,000 sitting in a bank account that he just lost his access to.
On August 9, 2007, Mindy's car, a red 2000 Acura Integra hatchback, was found in the area of 4370 Old International Airport Road near Alaska Air Cargo. It had been parked strangely at a spot at the airport parking lot.
Luckily, that spot had surveillance cameras, and the detectives were able to obtain the CCTV footage of the car being parked and left.
We were able to see Mindy Sloss's red Acura come into view, park in a stall, and see what appears to be a male wearing a backpack exit the vehicle and then walk outside of view of the camera.
When Mindy's car was searched, her purse was recovered, which had Mindy's wallet, house keys, and car keys, but her ATM card was still missing. And figured the man who left the car there and the man who made the withdrawals from Mindy's bank account must have been the same guy. To collect more evidence from the car, detectives made use of the scent transfer technology, a technology which is used to sense, transmit, and receive scent-enabled digital media. And through that, they were able to figure out that Mindy might have been sitting in the passenger seat. Even though the investigators were getting close to solving the puzzle, there were still a few pieces missing. With each passing day, detectives worked hours to hunt down Mindy's killer. However, they didn't have any potential leads. A few days after the investigation had started, Kathy Easley, one of Mindy's neighbors, eventually came forward with some crucial information about a suspicious man. She informed the detective about a 26-year-old man named Joshua Wade, who was another one of Mindy's neighbors. Kathy told the detective that Joshua acted very strangely when the detectives were conducting an investigation into Mindy's disappearance earlier that same year. To support her accusation, she even recalled an old incident she had with Joshua during the investigation period. Allegedly, when the detectives were working to locate Mindy, Joshua came up to Kathy and asked her not to tell the detectives that he too was Mindy's neighbor. When Kathy asked him the reason behind this, Joshua told her that he already had a warrant out for him, and that if the detective found out that he lived next door to Mindy, he might be caught. Kathy grew more curious, listening to Joshua's eerie words, and didn't hesitate to inquire further. Kathy asked why he had a warrant out for him. Joshua fumbled with his words a bit and said that he had broken into a drug dealer's home. And it was now when Kathy had decided to tell the police about the whole incident. The name Joshua Wade didn't ring a bell for the detectives. It turned out that Joshua had a history of violence, and there were reports that Mindy had expressed discomfort around him. Based on recent findings, the detectives tagged Joshua as a prime suspect in Mindy's homicide, but the detectives still needed some concrete proof to formally charge him. Using the evidence gathered through scent transfer technology, the detectives focused on the scent from the driver's seat in Mindy's car. This was done to isolate the abductor's scent from the passengers. The FBI brought in the dogs to track the abductors, armed with samples of scent which most likely belonged to Mindy's abductor. Tracking dogs were typically used immediately after a crime had taken place. But since there was no evidence in the initial stages of Mindy's case, they were never brought in. Since the trail was weeks old, the dogs' jobs were made even more challenging. However, even after facing difficulties, the dogs traced the scent to Joshua Wade. Detectives were shocked by the dogs' findings, but sometimes these searches could be tricky, and so for confirmation the FBI used the dogs again to track Mindy's bank card, which eventually led them to Joshua's house. Even though the search didn't find Joshua as he was on the run, evidence connecting him to the crime began to emerge. When the detectives conducted a search of Joshua's house, they found a jacket that matched the one seen on the surveillance footage from the ATM. Furthermore, the jacket also had a receipt for a bank transaction whose timestamp aligned perfectly with the one in the ATM footage. His phone was recovered as well, which had a picture of a gun similar to the one used to kill Mindy. The investigation took a shocking turn when the investigators looked further into Joshua's criminal history. He was eventually identified as an ex-convict who had previously been accused of another murder. Wade was once accused of murdering a 33-year-old woman named Della Brown in 2000. The case went to trial.
Every time he went to court, I went to court. Even if that hearing lasted for 10 minutes, I still went to court.
After serving little more than 3 years, Joshua was released on probation on December 12, 2006.
Trying to find Joshua Wade turned out to be a difficult task. APD and FBI hit the streets, tried to find him almost on a daily basis, discovered that we were minutes, hours behind where he had just been.
As the search for Joshua intensified, the police started receiving tips from the public, but still Joshua continued to evade capture.
leading to a cat and mouse game.
Devastated. I love him. I love you, Josh. I want you to turn yourself in.
A photo of Joshua from the ATM was released as well, and an old girlfriend recognized him. Her name was Christina Greaser, and she claimed to have driven Joshua around. Tina Greaser, Christina's mother, never liked Joshua and didn't want her daughter to be with him.
My daughter was hanging out with him quite a bit at that time, giving him rides, taking him places, sharing everything with me, because of course I was really concerned at the point. You know, I was like telling her things, his behavior was really weird.
Christina decided to come forward when she found out some incriminating items in Joshua's backpack, which he had accidentally left behind in Christina's car. These items almost confirmed Christina and her mother of Joshua's questionable background. When the detectives went to arrest Joshua, he held a few people as hostage in Christina's apartment building. The detectives were able to get everyone out safely, arrest Joshua, and take him into custody. When the detectives interrogated Joshua, he maintained a defiant attitude and smirked when confronted with evidence. Lisa, another one of Joshua's former girlfriends, eventually made a crucial confession. She revealed that Joshua had confessed to killing Mindy. With this information and Lisa's further cooperation, the detectives were now working to build a stronger case against Joshua. Joshua was finally charged with multiple state and federal charges, such as carjacking, theft, and bank fraud. On Thursday, September 13, 2007, a municipal worker doing site surveying work in the woods near Kinnick Bay Road, about 5 miles from Wasilla, Alaska, came across a severely burned and decomposing body. He contacted the authorities right away. When the detectives arrived at the crime scene to investigate, they were taken aback looking at the gruesome conditions of the body. Using dental records, they were able to identify the victim as the 52-year-old Mindy Sloss.
Once they found her body, you couldn't really put yourself in a denial position anymore. It was really hard because it was a confirmation of everything you knew in your heart.
Later, an autopsy was conducted, which confirmed that Mindy was a victim of a homicide. The killer shot Mindy in the back of her head and tried to burn her body, but that wasn't even the worst part. Some other signs showed that Mindy had been gagged and bound with zip ties. A DNA sample was obtained from the crime scene and sent for forensic analysis. The results came back and confirmed a match between Joshua's DNA and the one found at the crime scene. This placed Joshua at the crime scene and also linked him to Mindy's ATM card usage. As the detectives intensified the search for Mindy's killer, her loved ones gathered for her cremation. It was Mindy's wish that she be cremated after her time in this world. Mindy's ashes were scattered across the Mediterranean Sea, and no services were held for her. However, a few of Mindy's close friends and colleagues gathered together to celebrate her life and the joy she brought to them. Despite Joshua's best efforts to keep his ex-girlfriend, Lisa, from testifying, she finally revealed his confession. According to Lisa, Joshua had told her that he killed Mindy Sloss back in 2007 when he had recently been released from prison on probation. Joshua moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and into a house next door to Mindy's. Joshua was having a hard time with his life after prison. He was unable to pay the bills, and the fact that he was broke kept bothering him. Sometime in early August, Joshua had had a rough day at work. He returned home in a bad mood and broke into Mindy's house to rob her. Mindy was in her bathrobe at the time. She couldn't process what was happening, but still tried to cooperate as much as she could. Joshua then tied her up with zip ties, took her ATM card and PIN information from her, and then shoved her in the car while she was still alive. After traveling more than an hour north of Anchorage, Joshua drove the car to a rural cul-de-sac in a wooded area in Wasilla, pulled Mindy out of the car, and shot her in the back of the head with a .45 caliber Glock. Once he made sure that Mindy was dead, he set her body on fire. Later on, he withdrew $1,000 from her bank account. Joshua was only 26 at that time. In 2010, during a dramatic trial, 29-year-old Joshua Wade entered a guilty plea in the 2007 killing of Mindy Sloss. Within a few hours, when the jury in Alaska Superior Court was about to hand him a sentence, Joshua made a confession which shocked the entire courtroom.
And friends. I'm kind of glad I got caught.
And did you murder Della Brown, Mr. Wade?
I am admitting to the murder and the murder alone of Della Brown, Your Honor.
Joshua confessed that he also murdered the 33-year-old Della Brown in 2000 when he was only 19 years old. This resulted in a lengthy discussion by the jury. Both Mindy and Della were murdered years apart, and while Mindy had only been shot to death, Della had been beaten to death with a rock.
She was a very outgoing person, a very likable. I mean, she could strike up small talk with just about anybody. That's just the type of person she was.
Joshua was traveling through Spenard with his friends when he first saw Della and returned later to rob her.
She was just real outgoing. And if you looked at her direction, she always smiled back. She had a forever smile.
He stated that he found Della unconscious and, in an intoxicated state, Joshua bashed her head with a rock before assaulting and murdering her. Later, he dumped her half-naked body in a filthy shed. Adam Bartlett, one of Joshua's defense attorneys, asked the state court to approve the plea deal reached with prosecutors, stating that Joshua had great remorse about his actions and had entered the plea deal sincerely. He added that to save his humanity, Joshua wanted the families of his victims to have closure.
Who killed Della? I always knew it in my heart who killed Della, but he was going to admit it. I mean, I could have almost walked on air that day.
He added that to save his humanity, Joshua wanted the families of his victims to have closure. Although Joshua's defense lawyers claimed that their client had committed unforgivable sins in the horrific killings, they had come to see another side of him. According to them, Joshua was not the monster that people believed him to be. Joshua's attorneys provided a detailed description of his difficult life, highlighting how he endured trauma as a child. They even brought up an incident when Joshua had attempted to take his own life by drowning himself in a bathtub at the age of just 10. Because of the difficulties Joshua went through in his early life, he developed a drug addiction and soon followed his visits to psychiatric hospitals. Everything was now in front of the jury to look at. After a lengthy discussion, the jury announced the verdict. In addition to murdering Mindy and Della, the jury also found Joshua guilty on a federal charge of murder during a carjacking, given that he stole Mindy's car. He was handed a sentence of 99 years. Although Wade did manage to evade the death penalty, he would only be eligible to get out on parole after he was 95 years old. 4 years later, in 2014, Joshua attempted to make a deal with prosecutors in exchange for being moved to a federal facility by confessing to 3 additional murders. In exchange for a transfer to a federal prison where he could finish out his federal sentence, Joshua told the detectives that apart from Mindy and Della, he had also killed 3 other men. Although Joshua provided only vague details about those crimes, detectives suspected that he was hinting at the killings of John Martin in 1994, Henry Antawasruk in 1999, and another unidentified man in 2000. Their suspicions were confirmed once Joshua himself confessed to murdering the 3 men. When Joshua was in his teens, he murdered the 30-year-old Henry Antawasruk in 1999 and 38-year-old John Michael Martin in 1994, both of whom were mentally ill. Joshua claimed that he murdered his 3rd victim, who was never identified, on the same night he murdered Della in 2000. Detectives reopened all those cold cases and took another look at them. John Michael Martin died from a single gunshot wound shortly after leaving a local Village Inn restaurant. He was discovered by police in May 1994 near a cycling track that followed Northern Lights Boulevard. Martin had been frequently visiting the Village Inn for at least 5 years. He regularly came in during the day and night to meet his friends for coffee. But one tragic night, John left to walk home sometime around 2:30 a.m., and just 30 minutes later he was found dead. John's sister claimed that he was jobless and suffered from schizophrenia. John's case remained cold for years after detectives exhausted all leads. In December 1999, Henry Antawasruk's body was discovered in room number 221 of the Alaska Budget Motel in Fairview by a maintenance worker. The medical examination of Henry's body revealed that he had been killed 2 days before his body was discovered. Henry was staying at the motel of East 4th Avenue in Gamble Street for a while at the time of the murder and was paying a weekly rent of $194. Henry too had a mental health issue. Joshua admitted that he killed his 4th victim, an unidentified man, on the same night he murdered Della in 2000. He claimed that the man was present when he killed Della in the Spenard shed. Joshua knocked him unconscious, shoved him in the trunk of his car. and drove out to a spot in a valley where he took his clothes off and shot him in the head 2 times with a shotgun. Joshua further added that killing that man didn't really bother him. After making his confessions, 34-year-old Joshua was transferred to a federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, after serving the initial years of his lengthy sentence in Spring Creek Correctional Facility in Seward. Joshua's sentence provided some closure for his victims' families. Even though they were long gone, their loved ones were here to witness justice. Mindy's best friend, Jerry Yett, said that Mindy's life was tragically cut short and she would be greatly missed and remembered as a person who was compassionate, kind, and always supportive. Joshua Wade, who is currently in his mid-40s, is serving his lengthy sentence at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, USA. There have been no updates on the case of those 3 men that Joshua murdered before killing Mindy and Della. However, authorities stated that the investigation into the cases is still open. Do you think there are any more murders that Joshua committed and is hiding? As there are still many unsolved cold cases of mysterious victims from Alaska, do you think that the unknown man Joshua killed back in 2000 will ever be identified?
On May 17, 2001, the seemingly typical life of Alissa Turney, a 17-year-old middle school student from Paradise Valley, Arizona, took a baffling turn when she mysteriously vanished from her own home. Her disappearance was brushed off as that of a rebellious teenager, supported by the handwritten note she left behind, claiming she had fled to California. Yet as the piece of the puzzle started coming together, a different, more sinister story began to emerge. It was discovered that someone close to her, someone who had harbored an unsettling obsession for years, held the key to unraveling the mystery behind her disappearance. So, what really happened to Alissa? What secrets lay concealed within the shadows of her disappearance? Paradise Valley, located in Maricopa County, Arizona, is a Phoenix suburb and the state's wealthiest town, boasting around 12,000 residents. It's renowned for its luxury golf courses, high-end real estate, shopping options, and vibrant dining scene. Despite its smaller size and population compared to neighboring municipalities in the Phoenix metropolitan area, Paradise Valley hosts 8 full-service resorts, making it a top tourist destination in Arizona. According to statistics, the rate of crime in Paradise Valley is 47.15 per 1,000 residents during a standard year. And here our story begins. Alissa Marie Turney was born on April 3, 1984 to her father, Stephen Strom, and mother, Barbara Feiner Strom. At the time, Barbara had one other son named John, who was from a previous relationship. However, Barbara's relationship with Stephen did not last long, and in 1987, she began dating a man named Michael Roy Turney. Michael was a single father who had 3 sons named Rhett, James, and Mike from a previous relationship. Before Michael met Barbara, he had served as a deputy for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in the 1970s. Alongside this, he coached baseball and led the Boy Scouts. Transitioning to the 1980s, he found employment in the electrical field. Barbara and Michael's relationship progressed swiftly, leading to marriage. Barbara, along with her 2 children, John and Alissa, moved in with Michael, uniting their blended family under one roof. Michael went on to formally adopt John and Alissa, changing their last names to Turney. 4 years later, Sarah was born into this growing family. In the eyes of their neighbors, the 8 of them projected an image of a united and joyful family. Within their home, the concept of step was prohibited when referring to one another. As the children grew, they were exposed to different versions of how their parents had first met. Sarah remembered her father portraying himself as a knight in shining armor, who had gallantly rescued her mother. But in a cruel twist of fate, their world would soon be shattered. The year 1992 brought a double blow. An injury cost Michael his job in the electrical sector. Adding to their woes, Barbara received a devastating cancer diagnosis. Regrettably, on February 28, 1993, Barbara passed away. According to Sarah, everything changed after her mother's death. At the age of just 9, Alissa's companions at home consisted of her adoptive father, Michael, and her younger sister, Sarah. The boys in the family were all older than the girls.
and they had either already left the house or departed shortly after Barbara's passing.
Alissa is 4 years older than me, and she's basically the only mom I ever had. She really raised me, and she was the sweetest and the strongest girl I've ever met. She definitely is the source of all of my strength.
According to Sarah, Michael was notably strict during this time, and his strictness was particularly pronounced in his dealings with Alissa. This was partly due to Alissa's emerging streak of rebellion as she transitioned into adolescence. In 2001, at the age of 17, Alissa was in her junior year at Paradise Valley High School in Arizona. To support herself, she held a job in the Jack in the Box fast food restaurant. At the time, she was also in a relationship with a guy named Jonathan Lackman. Despite being a proficient student, Alissa occasionally dabbled in marijuana experimentation and would, as Sarah recalled, occasionally skip classes. In response to Alissa's behavior, Michael took to conducting frequent searches of her possessions, monitoring her phone calls and observing her from the parking lot during her shifts at Jack in the Box. However, the full extent of his surveillance wouldn't become apparent until much later, as you will soon find out. May 17, 2001, marked Alissa's final day of her junior year at high school. She followed her usual routine of attending school. Meanwhile, it was also Sarah's last day of 7th grade at Explorer Middle School in Phoenix, and she embarked on an end-of-year excursion to a water park. Around 11 a.m. that same day, Alissa made a brief appearance in her boyfriend, Jonathan's classroom. She informed him that her stepfather, Michael, would be picking her up from school early. Alissa also mentioned her plan to attend a party later that night and assured Jonathan she would see him there. However, from that point on, Alissa mysteriously vanished. No one ever laid eyes on her again. Later on, Michael would admit that he indeed took Alissa out of school on that fateful day. According to his account, they left for a lunch outing to commemorate the end of her junior year. However, their day took a sour turn when Alissa expressed a desire for more independence. This led to an argument between them. In his version of events, Michael stated that he brought Alissa back to their family residence at approximately 1 p.m. Afterward, he left to attend to errands.
From there, our father says that they went out to lunch, but eventually they get into a fight. Alissa wants more freedom over the summer, and our father says absolutely not. And our father says he last remembers seeing Alissa walking to her bedroom angry.
Meanwhile, as Sarah's end-of-year trip to the water park wrapped up, the bus returned to school. When she disembarked and looked around for her father, he was nowhere to be found. Michael had promised to pick her up. Since her home was nearby, Sarah and a friend opted to walk there. However, upon reaching home, they were met with a silence as no one answered the door. Sarah then attempted to reach her father by phone, leaving a voicemail, instructing him to pick her up at her friend's house later. Soon after, Michael did arrive, but his demeanor was deeply troubled. Once Sarah got into the truck, she found Michael in a state of panic. He instructed her to start calling Alissa because he had been trying to reach her without success, and he feared that something had befallen her. He handed his phone to Sarah, who then repeatedly dialed Alissa's number. There was no response from Alissa. Upon returning home, their voices echoed throughout the house as they called for Alissa. Upon entering her room, an unusual sight awaited them. Disorder in a space that was usually neat and organized. Alissa's backpack had been overturned, its contents scattered across the floor. They attempted to reach her once more, but this time, a faint buzzing sound hinted at a phone hidden somewhere within the room. As Sarah recollected, she discovered Alissa's phone resting on the dresser. Positioned nearby was a note, bearing Alissa's handwriting. The note informed them that she had gone to California. It explained that she had managed to save enough money to venture out on her own. In the past, Alissa had voiced her desire to leave home, like many teenagers wanting more independence. However, Sarah had never truly believed that Alissa would take the step of leaving. Alissa also frequently mentioned her aunt in California. She often expressed her desire to live with this aunt, mainly because of her strained relationship with Michael. "I wasn't worried," Sarah said. "I was under the impression she was going to be back. I don't think her being gone forever was anything that ever crossed my mind." Upon discovering the note, Michael initiated a search. He went door to door inquiring with neighbors. He also visited Alissa's favorite hangout spots and reached out to her friends. None of them could provide any clue about Alissa's whereabouts. It appeared that Alissa had vanished abruptly, without confiding in anyone about her intentions to leave. That evening, Michael took the step of contacting the police and attempted to file a missing persons report for Alissa. However, considering Alissa's age and the presence of the note she had left behind, the police categorized her as a runaway. This decision led to a lack of further investigation into the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Intriguingly, investigators never paid a visit to the Turney residence, nor did they conduct interviews with Alissa's family and friends. The seriousness of the situation, it seemed, was not fully grasped by the authorities. Roughly a week following Alissa's disappearance, Michael reported a significant development to the police. He recounted receiving a call at his home. This call had come from a payphone in Riverside, California. According to Michael, the caller was Alissa herself. In this call, Alissa used strong language, berated him, and demanded that he stay away from her. Following this, she had then hung up. At this point, it's worth noting that some things were not adding up. Alissa's disappearance did not quite fit the typical runaway scenario, as it was unusual for a runaway to abandon all of their possessions and money. Notably, Alissa had $1,800 untouched in her bank account, along with her makeup, hairbrush, keys, and phone. These perplexing discrepancies would remain unexplored until much later in the investigation. Throughout that summer, Sarah slept in her sister's bed, holding on to the hope that one day Alissa would return home. She anticipated Alissa's familiar scolding for rummaging through her belongings and borrowing her clothes while she was away, but it never came. "I didn't believe it at all," Sarah said. "I thought for sure she was at a friend's house for a few days or possibly away for the summer." With the start of the new school year and still no sign of Alissa returning to begin her senior year, the gravity of the situation became undeniably clear to Sarah. "It hit me then that it was real. My sister was gone," Sarah said. Shortly after, Sarah took the initiative to create a website dedicated to Alissa's search. This website served as a platform where individuals were encouraged to provide any leads or tips that might aid in locating Alissa. Despite the efforts, this online endeavor yielded no significant developments or leads in the quest to find her. For a long time, there was an unsettling silence. There was no word from Alissa, leaving everyone in the dark about her whereabouts. It appeared as though she had purposefully chosen to remain hidden, making no attempt to reestablish connections with anyone. However, the year 2006 was a turning point. It was at this time that a man's confession brought newfound hope and momentum to a search for answers. In December 2001, shortly after Alissa disappeared from her Paradise Valley home, a significant development occurred involving a man named Thomas Albert Heimer. He was arrested in Georgia, not for Alissa's case, but for taking the life of a woman named Sandra Goodman. This incident unfolded in a beachside motel located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Sandra and Heimer had crossed paths not long before this tragic event and had been traveling together. Heimer made the horrifying decision to end her life during their journey. Her body was later found concealed under a bed at the motel. In 2003, Heimer received a life sentence for the murder of Sandra. He never provided any motive or explanation for the crime. However, in a surprising turn of events in 2006, he decided to break his silence. From the confines of his prison cell, he began writing a series of letters which were addressed to local investigators. These letters contained a shocking admission. Heimer claimed the responsibility for the deaths of 21 females. Heimer recounted the gruesome detail and the cruel nature of these murders. His victims were mainly adolescent girls, who, like Alissa, had mysteriously disappeared. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took Heimer's claim of being a serial killer seriously and initiated an investigation. When presented with photographs of women, he astonishingly identified Alissa as a girl he had met in Phoenix back in May 2001. At this point, there appeared to be no grounds to doubt his assertion. Alissa's case underwent a significant shift. It was reassigned to detectives Will Anderson and Stuart Summershoe, who were part of the Phoenix Police Department's Missing and Unidentified Persons Unit. These detectives promptly traveled to Florida to speak with Heimer. During questioning, Heimer provided disturbing details of his interactions with Alissa. He recounted a troubling sequence of events that began in a hotel room and ended tragically with her strangulation. He went on to reveal that he had dismembered Alissa's body into parts, intending to dispose them at a recycling center. As detectives listened to Heimer's graphic narrative, something didn't quite add up. The Alissa he portrayed didn't match the Alissa they had come to know during their investigation. Most notably, Heimer claimed that she was a heroin addict, a statement that contradicted the information detectives had gathered about her. That's not something you can hide from your friends or your family, so that didn't match up with what Heimer was saying, Detective Summershoe said as regards to Alissa being a heroin addict. Under further questioning and scrutiny of specific details, Heimer's narrative began to disintegrate. He admitted to taking a young girl's life, but he was doubtful whether his victim was indeed Alissa. His account became increasingly dubious, raising questions about the validity of his claims. Moreover, as the investigation advanced, doubts surrounding Heimer's credibility deepened when he failed a polygraph examination. Detectives suspected that Heimer had come across Alissa's photograph in the newspaper and had seized the opportunity to use her case as a means of gaining fame. Although Heimer's confession didn't conclusively resolve the case, it did something else. It helped propel Alissa's disappearance to the forefront of priorities for Phoenix detectives. In 2008, the two detectives dedicated to Alissa's case intensified their investigation. They conducted interviews with friends and various family members, and by doing this, they discovered peculiar details about her home life. It came to their attention that Michael had installed surveillance cameras both outside and inside the family home, essentially subjecting his own children to continuous video monitoring. The detectives also discovered the presence of a passive recording system on the home telephone. This system automatically recorded all incoming and outgoing calls within the Turney household. This shed light on the extent of surveillance and recording taking place within the family environment. When questioned about the surveillance system, Michael asserted to detectives that he had installed the cameras for safety purposes rather than to spy on his children. However, he later forwarded some video clips to detectives. These clips featured Alissa alongside boys she had interacted with in the months leading up to her disappearance. This move suggested that her boyfriend and the men she interacted with at work should be scrutinized as potential suspects. When the detectives pressed Michael for surveillance video footage from the day Alissa disappeared, he claimed that he had thoroughly reviewed the entire 8-hour tape back in 2001 and found nothing of significance. However, he failed to produce the actual tape for the two detectives.
He also said that she had some unusual sexual traits. And again, in talking to her boyfriend, this did not match with Alissa. He claimed to have taken jewelry off her body and given it to ex-girlfriends. They don't remember this happening.
Furthermore, when questioned about the absence of a recording of the mysterious call from California, Michael told the detectives that the recording system had malfunctioned on that particular day. In the ensuing months, Sarah took on a more prominent role in her sister's case as Michael's relationship with the detectives deteriorated. Notably, he was the one who began withholding cooperation. Michael declined to participate in a formal police interview or submit to a polygraph examination. Instead, he opted for communication with detectives through phone calls and email exchanges. As their investigation unfolded, detectives quickly gathered insights from Alissa's childhood friends. This helped to shed light on her strained relationship with Michael. The friends revealed that Alissa disliked being at home and often spoke about Michael's overbearing attempts to control her life. One of her grade school friends, Katie Rothweiler, noted the stark difference in Alissa's demeanor when she was around friends compared to her family. Katie recalled how Alissa radiated with energy in the company of her friends, but seemed to lose that vitality when she returned home. It was as if the life within her somehow drained within those familiar walls. Some friends hinted that Alissa experienced feelings of degradation due to Michael's actions. The surprising revelation came when they also discovered from Alissa's boyfriend, Jonathan, that she had confided in him about Michael attempting to abuse her at a certain point.
She told me one time that he tried sexually abusing her when she was younger.
What did she say happened?
Dad picked her up early from school one day, driving around. I think the store was pulled over somewhere in, an unoccupied area, something like a desert area, and tried fooling around with her, and she got, aggressive.
Jonathan asserted that Alissa disclosed it occurred one day after school when Michael had picked her up ahead of schedule. According to Jonathan, Alissa had said that Michael had pulled off the road in a desert area and attempted inappropriate advances. Her friends also disclosed that Alissa had confided in them about a distressing situation. According to her accounts, one night she woke up to find herself tied to a chair and gagged with Michael on top of her. On December 11, 2008, Sarah received a phone call from detectives who informed her about a significant development in Alissa's case. They requested her presence at the police headquarters for an in-person meeting. Upon her arrival, she was deeply shocked by the information conveyed to her. A detective explained that they had reason to believe her father was involved in Alissa's disappearance. He also told her that her family home was currently being searched, and there was concerns that her father probably abused Alissa.
I go down there and essentially they sit me down and for 40 minutes tell me about how the man I thought he was. And then at the very end they say, and because your father hasn't cooperated, because he won't interview with us, because he won't give a handwriting sample, because he won't give DNA, we are raiding your home right now. We've gotten a search warrant and we're in there.
After receiving this news, Sarah left the building. Once inside her car, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation, she couldn't hold back her emotions and broke down. She did not fully grasp the situation, but she knew she had to go home to see what was happening. The raid the police had mentioned to Sarah had been carried out by the Phoenix Police Bomb Squad and officials from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. It resulted in the evacuation of over 100 nearby residents. During a news conference later that evening, the police disclosed more details about the raid. They revealed that they had executed a search warrant at Michael's residence, primarily seeking evidence related to Alissa's case. They had detained Michael while he was outside, picking up his mail, and they requested his handwriting and DNA samples. However, it was discoveries made inside the house that necessitated the neighborhood evacuation. They found over 30 improvised explosive devices and a substantial arsenal of weapons, enough to cause significant damage to the house and neighboring properties. Among the findings were 19 loaded high-caliber assault rifles, 2 homemade silencers, and a van on the property loaded with gasoline. During the search, law enforcement also came across homemade VHS tapes featuring Alissa inside her home, dating back to the 1980s. However, notably absent were any tapes documenting the day she had gone missing. In addition, they discovered contracts drafted by Michael, which he had made Alissa sign. One such contract dated from the year before her disappearance, in which Alissa declared that she had never been subjected to any form of molestation by Michael.
In 2008, Phoenix police served a search warrant on Turney's home in connection to Alissa's disappearance and ended up finding a home full of weapons and secret tapes.
They seized explosives, ammunition, and homemade silencers and arrested Turney, but they also discovered new video evidence showing Alissa. Police say Turney set up hidden cameras in and outside of the house to keep tabs on Alissa. He even recorded thousands of hours of phone calls.
You probably have her stated. How's that for a disgusting thought? I'm sorry, that's really gross to say about your own daughter.
But of all the tapes he had of Alissa, he never could tell Phoenix PD where the tape was from May 17th, 2001.
Mike is the only one who says that child returned to the home that day. He does not provide us with a videotape that shows her coming home.
And police learned even more horrifying details in their investigation.
She's spoken to her friends, she's spoken to other family members about being handcuffed, about being gagged, about being woken up with him on top of her, holding her down.
Apart from that, a 98-page document discovered in the home shed light on the purpose behind amassing such an arsenal of weapons. Titled The Diary of a Madman Martyr, this document was authored by Michael himself. In it, he expressed his belief that the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers was responsible for abducting and subsequently ending Alissa's life. According to him,
The union harbored a long-standing grudge against him and had kidnapped Alissa as a form of retribution. Michael went on to claim that he had eliminated 2 individuals he referred to as assassins who were responsible for Alissa's demise. He asserted that these assassins had buried her remains in Desert Center, California. Shockingly, the documents detailed his operational plan for seeking revenge, which included driving an explosive-filled van into the Union Hall, detonating it, and then shooting any survivors attempting to exit the building. He intended to conclude by taking his own life. The significance of the raid carried out on Michael's residence could not be overstated, as it occurred just 4 days before the union's scheduled meeting. Authorities had effectively thwarted a potential mass tragedy. The old VHS tapes discovered in the aftermath of the raid primarily contained typical family moments that held little relevance to Alissa's case. Similarly, audio recordings yielded no substantial leads, and even an extensive excavation of the backyard failed to produce any breakthroughs. Michael maintained his innocence as regards Alissa's disappearance.
You have a background in law enforcement.
Yes, I do.
You know that oftentimes the first person they look as suspect might be family members.
They always look at the family member first. That's just standard 101 investigations.
So why take it as such an insult?
I didn't take it as an insult. I took it as fighting with someone for 6 or 7 years to get them to do what I wanted them to do.
But Mr. Turney, by refusing to answer their questions, as a former law enforcement person yourself...
I didn't refuse to answer their questions.
Don't you see how that would raise eyebrows?
No, because that's a lie. I didn't refuse to answer questions. They were calling me every day, asking me questions every single day. Every day.
But they wanted to sit down with you.
And they would have gotten that. All they had to do was set the time and the place, and it would have certainly occurred.
Well, let's clear some of the things that they're saying about you.
No, that's fine.
At the beginning, the detectives were very focused on Heimer. They thought maybe he had done it. But as they began to interview her friends, some disturbing things start to surface.
Oh, yeah.
And they say that among them was the feeling that you were obsessed with her. You've heard this before.
It's on the affidavit, yes.
That you were very controlling.
Yes.
And very strict. That you had her sign contracts. You followed her around. You interviewed parents of any new friends of hers. Do you feel that went far beyond what a normal parent would do?
Oh, it depends on who you talk to. If it would avoid anything happening to my daughter, yes, I don't think it was far beyond. At the time, I look back at it because she ran away as a result of that. Yeah, of course I feel bad about it.
Other people said you were demeaning to Alissa, that you made her feel stupid.
That's an absolute lie. I wouldn't allow that with Alissa because I want Alissa to have good self-esteem of herself.
But her friends said that you were demeaning to her. You called her stupid. In a phone call that has surfaced since then, you called Alissa a bitch.
Really? See, I'm not aware of that.
It's on a recording.
Well, then fine. Let's bring all the recordings out. I got no problem with that.
Did you call her that?
Did I call Alissa a bitch? I don't remember. I very well could have one time when I was mad at her. Who knows?
That's demeaning.
I guess it is.
So what were you planning to do?
Just bring attention to Alissa.
How are you going to do this?
Take a shotgun and blow my head off. That's what I tried to do in '94.
And what about the firecrackers and the bombs and the explosives?
What bombs? You mean a few little flash things that would make some noise, just to make noise? You can't kill anybody with a pipe bomb unless you stick it down their throat.
Police say you were going to bomb the local union hall.
Sure they did that because they don't understand that you can't take that building down with a bomb. You can't burn it down. It's an
You weren't going to do
inflammable
that?
building. What?
You weren't going to do that?
Not in the least bit. Why? I'm going to murder a bunch of innocent people? That sounds insane.
Mr. Turney, you say the government's out to get you, the union's out to get you, the Phoenix Police Department's out to get you. It sounds like you think the world is out to get you, and it sounds a little delusional.
Well, that's what they investigated. I just went and talked to the government's forensic psychologist. She said I had a paranoid personality, but she didn't say delusional.
Do you think you have a paranoid personality?
You ever wore a badge and a gun?
No.
You ever been in the military?
No.
Guarantee you'll have a paranoid personality after that for the rest of your life. That just comes with it, the experience.
Tell me why we should believe you.
Why you should believe me? Let's see. I don't know, probably because the fact that Sometimes when people tell things that seem to be so irrational, sometimes they aren't true.
You're not capable of killing your stepdaughter.
I didn't kill my stepdaughter. I'm not capable of killing my stepdaughter.
In June 2010, Michael received a 10-year prison sentence, not for Alissa's disappearance, but for possessing pipe bombs. Sarah was left with unanswered questions. In the years that followed, Sarah's growing suspicions about her own father led her to embark on a personal quest for answers. During Michael's imprisonment, they occasionally communicated via email. Initially, Sarah inquired about her sister and what the police had discovered at home, but Michael often avoided those topics. In 2017, Michael was released from prison, regaining his freedom. That same year, Sarah confronted her father and pressed him for an explanation, but he refused to provide one. Instead, he mentioned that he would reveal the truth on his deathbed. Feeling frustrated and heartbroken, Sarah sought advice from law enforcement on how to keep her sister's case in the public eye. Their suggestion was to build a social media following, which she decided to do. To prepare, Sarah set out to obtain all available police records pertaining to her sister's disappearance. Her request to the Phoenix Police Department yielded nearly 3,000 pages of publicly available notes and case files. In just 6 weeks, she sifted through this extensive documentation, uncovering crucial details about the case. Following this research, she established social media accounts under the handle Justice for Alissa on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Sarah proactively reached out to media outlets and true crime enthusiasts, effectively raising awareness about her sister's case. Her efforts garnered significant attention. Furthermore, she dedicated a year to fundraising, eventually allowing her to erect a billboard along Interstate 17 near 19th Avenue, further promoting Alissa's cause. In September 2019, Sarah launched her podcast, Voices for Justice. Through this platform, she set out to unveil lesser-known details not commonly accessible to the public or the true crime community. Her podcast served as a comprehensive account of her sister's disappearance, woven together from the extensive information she had collected and thoroughly examined. In April 2020, Sarah joined TikTok as a way to pass time during quarantine. However, it quickly transformed into a platform for advocating her sister's case. Within a short period, starting from late April, her videos amassed 10 million likes.
I'm like, making silly stuff about Alissa, but it catches fire. Like, my goodness, it caught wind so fast. And I never expected it, but I just continued to make content on TikTok and it continued to pick up. I mean, I have almost 1 million followers on there now, but it's been an amazing tool in getting justice for her.
Her TikTok post included her father's recorded footage of Alissa before her disappearance and snippets from interviews with friends and family discussing Alissa's disappearance. She also posted a recording of a particular conversation she had with her father.
So, mine and Alissa's father has been the only person of interest in Alissa's case for almost 10 years. Yet, the police have never interviewed him. So, I did it myself. And here's what he had to say when I asked him what happened to Alissa.
Be there at the deathbed, sir, and I'll give you all the honest answers you want to hear.
Why don't you give them to me now?
Because you got them now.
Then why are you making me this offer to go to your deathbed?
Well, Sarah, what are you looking for?
Yep. And when I went to the police and gave them the recording, do you know what the commander told me? Well, Sarah, he didn't confess to us. Please help me share this. This is insane and should never happen to anyone.
Sarah eventually cut ties with her father and channeled her efforts into steadily building her social media following. On August 20th, 2020, an unexpected turn of events unfolded in the investigation into Alissa's baffling disappearance. Michael, who was 72 years old at the time, was arrested. The sequence of events unfolded as follows. In June 2020, Phoenix law enforcement referred Alissa's case to the prosecutor's office, seeking charges against Michael. Then, on August 19th, a grand jury issued an indictment. This indictment charged Michael with 1 count of second-degree murder, a Class 1 felony, related to Alissa's disappearance. Consequently, his arrest took place on the very next day.
In other developing news now, today was a day 19 years in the making for Alissa Turney's family. Today, her stepfather was arrested in her disappearance and murder back in 2001 when she was just a teenager. Well, the case had gone cold, but so many people involved in Alissa's life, they always believed that her stepdad was involved.
In tonight's True Crime Arizona, Brianna Whitney takes an in-depth look at old videos, audio recordings, and interviews from her stepfather, which are chilling.
Nearly 2 decades ago, 17-year-old Alissa Turney lived here, Paradise Valley, with her little sister Sarah and her stepfather, Michael Turney. Judy Wacker lived next door and still lives there today.
The whole time he was there, we felt kind of really uncomfortable. We always felt like we were being watched. I used to call him my psycho neighbor.
You know, my secrets are always told everywhere by a big mouth. And of course, there's no foundation for them or I'd be in jail.
While the police did not disclose the specifics of Michael Turney's arrest or the direct impact of Sarah's social media advocacy on resolving Alissa Turney's case, Maricopa County Attorney Alistair Adele did acknowledge Sarah's social media campaign during a press conference.
Alissa's life was just beginning. For nearly 20 years, those who loved Alissa have longed to see her or hear from her one last time. They have longed for closure and demanded that anyone who was responsible for her disappearance be held accountable. Today, I am announcing the grand jury indictment for second-degree murder of Michael Roy Turney, Alissa's stepfather. With this announcement, I must say that a charge of a crime is merely an accusation. The defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And I would also be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank the dedicated officers at the Phoenix Police Department for their decade-long work on this case. They worked tirelessly to get us to this point. They laid down the facts as they saw them. They didn't give up on Alissa. Their integrity and professionalism is what we expect from our police departments, and I could not be prouder of them, and so should the community. To Alissa's sister, Sarah Turney, your perseverance and commitment to finding justice for your sister, Alissa, is a testament to the love of a sister. Because of that love, Alissa's light has never gone out. And she lives on in the stories and photos that you have shared with the community.
In response, Sarah promptly shared the news on Twitter, expressing her gratitude for her father's arrest. Michael pleaded not guilty to Alissa's death, and his case proceeded to trial. On July 6, 2023, the trial commenced. On that day in the Maricopa County courtroom, jurors were introduced to the prosecution's key witness, Sarah. In her testimony, she spoke about her father's extensive control over Alissa and outlined the various manners in which Michael had criticized her. The prosecution presented a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence suggesting Michael's involvement in Alissa's demise. However, the defense countered by highlighting the absence of DNA or blood evidence, emphasizing the lack of conclusive proof regarding Alissa's fate. They emphasized that without a body, it was not certain that Alissa was dead. Seated in a wheelchair, Michael attentively listened to the proceedings. Right behind him in the courtroom sat Alissa's biological father, Stephen Strom. Stephen would later express his feelings regarding Michael, stating that he would like to take his life for what he had allegedly done. During the 5th day of trial, which occurred on July 13, 2023, the prosecution presented a piece of evidence, an audio recording of a phone conversation between Michael and an individual named Michael Seth. In the recording, Michael appeared agitated. He also used derogatory language when referring to Alissa. This audio evidence appeared to be a significant blow to Michael's defense.
But on Thursday, the jury heard revealing testimony through phone calls, recorded phone calls, where they heard not only Alissa's voice, but also a pretty jaw-dropping call from Mike Turney, where he is revealing his disdain for dealing with his daughter, Alissa.
Any day today is a bad day. Sarah don't want to go to school. Alyssa's supposed to go in late. She lost her wallet. You know, I'm giving her basically an alternative cops where she can bond back with me and the family and stop being such a, you know, distance this family from all the problems we've had from her boyfriend. And she said no. So for the first time in my life, I've got to take a kid that I love and call the cops. Probably going to lose the house. Everything else is going to be over because of some stupid ass bitch. More than likely she's going to run away anyway after she gets busted. They're not going to put her in jail this time, I almost guarantee it. In other words, my life sucks. And it's just terrible. I can have a good time with Sarah so long as Alissa doesn't. She's always in there with something. I don't give a what it is. Now I'm going to have to put up with and deal with some that's doing all kinds of to this family.
While that audio played in court, some of the jurors looked stunned. Sarah, the sister of Alissa, she broke down into tears in the gallery. Her brother James was sitting next to her, tried to console her. Then the prosecution played another recorded call for this jury. It was placed about a month before Alissa went missing. The teen was speaking to her aunt Lynette. This was after a disagreement with her father over her boyfriend.
I'd be freaking out all of a sudden, just... It's my dad. What do you expect? Huh? What do you expect? He's always like that. I know, but he hasn't done that in like many years. Because you haven't been around him.
The next big question in this case is, will the defendant testify? I was watching his face really closely when the judge asked his team, were they planning to call him? He showed no visible reaction as his attorney said that they are going to reserve that conversation until after the state rests its case.
However, on Monday, July 17, 2023, the judge made a crucial decision, stating that there wasn't sufficient evidence for the case to proceed under Arizona's Rule 20. Consequently, Michael was acquitted, and the legal system cannot pursue another trial against him. The verdict was a relief for Michael, however. Devastated family members who had hoped for justice were overcome with tears. Sarah left the courthouse without addressing reporters. Following this, Jamie Jackson, one of Michael's defense attorneys, issued a statement on Michael's behalf to the media. In the statement, Michael expressed his happiness that the judge had ruled in his favor, and he conveyed his excitement about the prospect of being released from custody. Jackson also emphasized that Michael remained deeply concerned about the case and Alissa's fate. He was also determined to uncover the truth about the real killer. Sarah and some of her siblings also released a joint statement. In her message, she thanked the detectives and her online community for their support, even though the outcome wasn't what they had hoped for. James Turney, her brother, also spoke about their experiences as a victim's family. Sarah stressed the importance of ongoing advocacy and hope for families like theirs. She ended her message with heartfelt words to Alissa, expressing love, apologies, and a hope that Alissa knows she tried her best. As we conclude this complex and emotional case, two questions linger. What truly happened to Alissa? And will the truth about her disappearance ever come to light? We thank you for joining us on this journey through the twists and turns of Alissa Turney's story, and we hope that someday justice will be served.